Rabbi Isai, we are confronted with a type of issue that probably most of you, judging by your age, have never seen in your life. I have never seen it myself. There are Rabbonim who have said, I'm sure you've heard them, say that they are literally embarrassed to have to speak about this topic. More than one and more than two have said that. I'm asking if anybody here ever had heard of any issue in Klal Yisrael, b'nogea to you or anything, that Rabbonim, no matter how poshut the issue was, no matter how simple it was, no matter how chomer it was, they used such a lashon that they are embarrassed to have to speak about it. It's a modnazach, not one and not two. There are people that are saying it's not a pella by them, it's a bezoyin that they even have to speak about this. There are issues of money and tznius and all sorts of things. And in my life, I have not heard such a lashon. Yet over here, a lot of people are saying it. Boy bisman, that at the same time, there are Bacharim and Yungalite that are saying, I don't understand why they're embarrassed. I have no idea what's going on. Nobody ever told me anything about this. So you have Mamish Modnazach. You have some, on Michad Gisa, you have people that are saying that it's so poshut that it's a bezoyin they even have to speak about it. Midach Gisa, you have people also saying, I don't even understand why, well, what the issue is. Nobody ever told me about this. And the truth of the matter is, this is because this particular pirza that we're talking, and it's Zionism, is different than all the other pirzas in the world. Reb Chaim Briska mentioned that these Zionists, as opposed to the other people that try to shmad the Jews, they knew his lashon was exactly where to shoot their arrows at Klal Yisrael. Other people, there are plenty of shmatniks throughout history, but these people knew exactly where to shoot their arrows. Also, b'shem Reb Chaim, it says that a guy like Theodore Herzl, who was a mamish, the Chazon Ish said about him, it's in Maaseh Ish, that you can say on him Yamach Shemoy. He says in front of Freya, he holds it's not Kedai, they'll get upset. But that's the madrega that he was on. That he's a threat to Klal Yisrael. This Shegetz, this guy who celebrated Christmas and not Hanukkah, this guy who had an idea that he wants to shmad all the Jews meaning that they should all convert to Christianity. It's in his diary. That was one idea. Zionism was not his first plan. He had various other plans. This converting the Jews on a Sunday afternoon in a church was one of the plans. So this guy is a threat to Klal Yisrael, and Reb Chaim said he's a threat because he's using Eretz Yisrael and he's using musogim that are dear to Klal Yisrael. And so we have something that is extremely unusual, this Zionist shmad. Now, Me'idach Gisa, people are here, and I'm sure that you're going to tell me nobody ever explained to you what a Zionist shmad is. I'm sure you've heard stories, or maybe you have relatives from back in the olden days. Your grandparents told you that they had grandparents who threw away their tefillin because of the Zionists and stuff, but that's not what's happening today, is it? No, the Zionist shmad is a different thing altogether, and this is what's goyim, this bizarre situation, where you have people that are michad gisa, mamish, it's a bezoyin for them to speak about it. Midach gisa, you have so many people that have no musig of what's going on. When I once, 5 years ago, when this same thing happened, so I told one of the Rosh Hashivas I was talking to that this is the pshat in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Emes nederes u'naorim pnei zakenim yalbinu. What's the connection between the two? So I said it's Emes nederes, but it doesn't say Emes nishtakach. The Emes will disappear one day; it'll become hidden. Doesn't mean that it'll be forgotten. It means people who know the Emes will still have it. It's just that the mikan ve'elech, the new people, are not going to have the Emes. So what's going to happen is that the older people who already had the MS, just they're not going to forget it, are going to be around, and they're going to see the younger people who don't know anything about the MS, and the younger people are going to be saying crazy things, and the older people are going to know Dover Pashut, and it's mamish going to be Norim Pnei Zakenim Yalbinu. That's what it means when they say they're embarrassed when they hear people talking like that. That's just a vort. But the emesin is, it has nothing to do with Bisman Hazeh, older people, younger people. It was like this even in Europe. I have in front of me a sefer. It's called Kol Yaakov, from Yid Reb Yaakov Teitelbaum. He was a very chashuv Yid. He was the Rav in Camp Aguda before Rabbi Belsky was, and he was the Nasi of the Tzirei Agudas Yisrael in Europe, in Wien. And he has a story over, he was Talmud of Reb Meir Arik. And he has a story in his sefer, he writes, where he was kicked out of the yeshiva. One day he walks into yeshiva, and the Rebbe, Reb Meir Arik, him and 4 other guys, and they wouldn't let him into Shiur. The Rebbe wouldn't let him into Shiur. And he asked, why? And they said, Bochrim that go to that event that you guys went to last night, there was a new Rav in town, Rabbi Chayes. I know who he was. He was a from religious Zionist rabbi. You'd call him a Mizrachist, Datilu Umi, one of these. Bochrim that go to such an event, and he had a Hachtorah in town. And some guys from the yeshiva went to hear the Hachtorah. He says, there are no Talmidim of mine. So there was a Talmud, his name was Reb Michal Fruminger, and they asked Reb Michal Fruminger if they could please, just if the Rebbe is asking just to speak to them a bit. And he was. And they went to Reb Meir Arik and they said, Rebbe, whatever you tell us, we're makabel. The problem is, how should we know there was anything wrong with that event, with that rabbi? You're our Rebbe. You teach us. Tell us what we should know, what you ever taught us, how we should ever know that there's something wrong with this. They had no idea. Mamish like what's going on today. He said, Dover Poshet, he kicked them out of yeshiva. And they're like, Rebbe, we have no idea what's wrong. You say it's wrong, fine, but how should we know? He let them back into yeshiva, it says, and from then on, he was teaching them about all the deviant movements in Klal Yisrael from Christianity down. He made a seder on it, and to explain to them all the deviant movements. But the only time you're going to find something like this, where for certain people that know, it's a dover poshut and there's nothing to discuss, whereas by other people, they have no idea what's wrong, it's only with Zionism. It's not a generation gap, it's a knowledge gap. There are certain people that mamish know, and others, they could be choshev yidden. They have no idea. This was in Europe. We see what's happening bisman hazeh. Let's go somewhere in the middle. I have in front of me the Mechtavim U'Maimorim from Rav Shach. It's Chelik Aleph, Michtav Tezvov. And here, Rav Shach says, he's talking about something that is Yodua for 2,000 years, how Klal Yisrael fights their enemies. They're anti-Semites out there. They're people that don't like us. So everybody knows, Gans Klal Yisrael knows, that whenever one of the Rabbonim needed to do some askonus by a government, they would first learn Parshas Vayishlach, the Parsha where Yaakov met Esav. And we know that Yaakov bowed down to Esav. And the reason he did so was this was a lesson, L'doiris, it says everywhere, that in order for us to fight Esav, we have to be machnia ourselves to him. In Golus particularly, in the Ramban, in the Hakdama, Ramban has a little Hakdama to Parshas, in the Ramban in the Hakdama to the Parsha. If we want Esav to leave us alone, we need to bow to him in Golus specifically. It's a very simple thing. I wrote this in my book. There are different teva of different brias. So everybody knows if you're swimming in the ocean and chas v'sholom you meet a shark, you're supposed to punch him and hit him and kick him, whatever you can do, and maybe he'll leave you alone. But if you're in the forest and you meet a grizzly bear, if you try that mahalach, you're going to become breakfast for him. You don't punch and kick and stomp on a grizzly bear. For him, you play dead. You make believe you're not a threat. So by some creatures, the teva works this way, and by others, it works the other way. The teva of Jews and Goyim, of Yaakov and Esav, works that the more we lay low, the more chance we have of survival. And everybody knows this. If you look in the Chafetz Chaim, however, in Parshas Devarim, Chafetz Chaim al HaTorah, the old one, there's a new Chafetz Chaim al HaTorah, I'm talking about the old one. He says over there, he brings the Ramban about how Yaakov Avinu prepared for 3 things, and L'molchomo, the Ramban says it means to run away. Because L'molchomo you can touch up 2 ways in English. You can say prepare for a war, which means get your sword, or prepare for war, excuse me, which means get your sword, or prepare for a war is coming, which means get your passport. And the Ramban says it means get your passport. And Chafetz Chaim said that over there in that little piece, first piece in Parshas Devarim, that Kol Zman, we followed the instructions of our Chazal. Baruch Hashem, we survived. Everybody knows the Ness, how Klal Yisrael survived so long. However, Chadoshim Mikarav Bo, there's a new Shita out there. He meant the Zionists. There's a new Shita out there that say we have to abandon the weapons of our father Yaakov and take up the weapons of Esav, the fist. We're going to fight the anti-Semites. We're going to be strong. We're going to, if somebody does something, we're going to make sure he's fired, or maybe we'll kill him, or maybe we'll have an army and we'll go beat them up, or whatever it is. Rachmana litzlan, he says, Rachmana litzlan, bad things can happen with this mahalach. Now, I don't know when the Chafetz Chaim said that. He was nifta 1933. Based on the history, let's just give a ballpark 1920, okay? In 1990, Rav Shach gave this shmooze that I have in front of me. Rav Shach says it's the exact same shmooze, with the exact same makayris as the Chafetz Chaim has, the exact same inyan. And there he's talking about Israel, and how they treat their political enemies, and how if Klal Yisrael wants to survive, we can't go around saying that we're going to be strong and we're going to kill everybody and try to scare people away. This is what he says, and he brings the same makayris. But then he says, listen to this. So let's assume that between the time the Chafetz Chaim said this and when Rav Shach wrote this, let's assume 70 years. What 70 years? 3 dairis, 2.5 dairis? Rav Shach says, quote, Ach hayoim ledavoinenu, koyev halev. It hurts the heart. Ki af talmidei chachomim, rabbonim, tzadikim, einam chadurim b'havonazu. They do not understand this. Talmidei Chachomim, Rabbonim, and Tzadikim. They don't understand this. Ki yesh lanu derech mishalanu. Michad gisa, on one, we have our own way. What works for the Goyim to fight other Goyim, to protect themselves from other Goyim, does not work for us. We are a different teva. One guy to another guy is like one grizzly bear to another grizzly bear, derech moshel. For us, it's like a human being has to play dead. It's a different teva. It's not the pshat soymech al nes. When you meet a bear and you play dead, it's not soymech al nes, fakert. Al pi derech ha-teva, that's best for you. Klal Yisrael's teva, the teva between Klal Yisrael and Goyim, whatever the siba of the sinna of the Goyim are, the derech ha-teva is talelo. And that works for us. It's your best chance at the very least. But Bizman Hazeh, he says, people don't know this. Michad gisa poilim neged ha'umoisim is garim bahem. The Israelis, he says, they do actions against the goyim and they provoke them. V'choishvim letumam, and they think of their naivete. Hein anu yachsonim kamoyhem. We're the same like any other guy. Ve'inenu pchusei dargamehem. We are not less than any of them. V'loma yigrach alkenu lahachnea tachas balusam. Why should we bow to them? America yoimer, America toimer kach v'yanu noimar lehepach. America will tell us one thing and we'll do whatever we want. But midach gisa, they dance in front of them, the Mayofis dance. It was an old dance that the Goyishal landlord used to make the Jewish rentor, the Jewish soicher, dance in front of him just for anti-Semitic reasons. Midach gisa, he says, the biggest chanifim in the world. V'chayovim oleinu lo'ir b'kirbeinu es ha'emes ha'masura. But before we get to the emes ha'masura, do you understand what's going on over here? There was a hashkafa that for 2,000 years everybody understood. It was noigeya everyone, not like something that wasn't noigeya. The Torah says that he doesn't have mitzvahs tluyas ba'aretz because it's loy shchiach. There weren't so many people in Eretz Yisrael. Things that weren't shchiach, things are forgotten. But every door, Klal Yisrael feared zich like this. Whoever went for his shtadlus, this is what they did. And now the Zionists said, no, we don't want to do that. And 70 years later, Rav Shach is saying, Talmidei Chachomim Tzadikim and Rabbonim don't know this. Now, not everybody didn't know this. Rav Shach knew this. But you understand what this is? How in 70 years, 50, 70, 80 years maybe, a hashkafa was ripped out of Klal Yisrael, a hashkafa that everybody knew. Rabbonim, tzadikim, talmidei chachomim, that's his lashon, do not know this. Now, in 1990, how old are these Rabbonim, tzadikim, talmidei chachomim? Let's be generous. Let's say they're 50. Right? Tzadikim, Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbonim. If they were 50 in 1990, those same people today are 85. I don't know where anybody here was in 1990. But that means that if you were 1990 and you had a Rebbe who was a Talmid Chacham or a Rav or a Tzaddik, the odds are, or could very well be, he didn't know this. And now you're talking about the Rebbe's Rebbe's Rebbe. It's 35 years since he said this. It's another door and a half. How do you rip a hashkafa out of Klal Yisrael? This is what they did. This is what I call it's a knowledge gap. Michad Gisa, there are people that mamish know, like Rav Shach. There are people, on the other hand, that have no musug of what's going on. And what happened over here? What happened over here is Zionism. It's not the same as any other shmad. It was, Rebbe Liber wrote in the Haskama to my book on this topic, that they were more matzliach than anybody else to inflict their poison, to inject their poison into Erlich HaYidin and Klal Yisrael. So how did they do this? What did they do? What is different about this that people mamish don't even understand? Talmidei Chachamim Rabbanim, what did they want, first of all? What did they want? And how did they do it? So, part of this is that if you think that it used to be in the olden days that people knew more than you do today, so never mind Rabbi Yaakov Teitelbaum and Wien, but it was the same always from the day that Zionism began, from the first Zionist Congress in the late 1800s. It was the same as it is today. People were saying, well, let's see, Reb David Soloveitchik. I have his shmuzin in front of me. He says, I remember, he was in Brisk in Lita. He says, Kishabo Ben Gurion v'Jabotinsky lebrisk, two shkotzim, it doesn't matter exactly who they are. Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion came to Brisk, Lidroi shal dvar Zionis, to darshan about Zionism, v'yadanu sheyagiu b'Shabbos. They arrived on Shabbos, and they sent Bochrim from the yeshiva saw them getting off the train in the train station in Brisk on Etzem Yom HaShabbos. They told everybody, you know, these guys arrived on Shabbos. Guess what? Nobody believed them. Jabotinsky Ben Gurion would be Machal Shabbos? No way. Kulam tonu shlo yuchel yoshibo b'Shabbos. They didn't believe it. They didn't believe. I suppose they said, there's no Zionism anymore nowadays. That was in the olden days, before Jabotinsky, but nowadays they should be Machal Shabbos? No way. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. So, I want to explain what the maracha is now that we're fighting, because if it wasn't for this WZO thing, nobody would be here now. I know because I've been speaking about this topic here. This Rabbi Schwartz, who's sitting in front of me, was a bach. He grew up in my shul for many years, and he'll be made that I've been speaking about this for decades, mamish, and now already I can say doiris. And the interest happens now because of what's going on, and there's a maracha to fight. And we have to understand what the maracha is and how to fight it. And in order to do that, we have to understand this modna bria, this Zionism, because what I'm describing over here are A, facts, but B, they make no sense. Hashkafas were ripped out of Klal Yisrael, Rabbonim, Tzadikim, Talmidei Chachamim just disappeared, stuff that everybody knew as a davar pashut. Things that are pashut for a Rosh Hashiva kicks out his Bacharim. The Bacharim have no idea what they did wrong. And even Bisman Hazeh, the same thing. Rabbonim is saying they're embarrassed, they even have to say this. And Bacharim and Yungalai are saying, what's going on? There is such a knowledge gap between two people. There is no other issue in Klal Yisrael that I could remember, not in my days, that this happens, and this has to do with what Reb Chaim said. So first I'm going to start with the truth of the matter is, however long I plan on speaking, there was a shmooze 3 minutes on this topic by Rav Dov Landau, And I have to tell you that he mamish said everything in those 3 minutes. It's just that he said actually a little earlier, a few weeks prior to that, he, in an interview, some people from a Shiur sort of organization came to him. We have the transcript, it's not a secret. He said it's hard to explain to the people, Bizman Hazeh, to Bochrim, certain things. But he mamish said everything. I'm going to play his 3 minutes, and I'm going to explain what he's saying and what he means.
ההסתדרות הציונית נוסדה במטרה לעשות את עם ישראל עם חילוני. זו הייתה מטרה. וזה היה ביצוע, וזה הם עשו. לעשות עם חילוני. בלי בורוי לא כמו נעשה, בלי שום דבר. זו הייתה מטרה. וזה במידה מסוימת עשו, בגלל המטרה הזאת, אז הם בנו גם מדינה חילונית. העניינים שאנחנו הולכים כאן בבחירות במדינה חילונית, עניין אחר לגמרי. אבל להשתתף בהשתתפות שכולה כפיר בבוי רוילום, כפיר בתרא, בדברים, הכל בעם ישראל, שהוא עם קודש השם, הפוך אותו לעם מונומוים. זה הדבר מאוד חמור, הכל חילוני. אז אי אפשר להשתתף במוסדות שלהם. אי אפשר להשתתף, זה קרה, יש לנו קשר איתם. יש לנו קשר, אין שום דבר, זה הכל, זה הדבר, אפשר להגיד את המילים הכי חריפות, דני רוצה להתבטא חריף, אבל העובדה היא לעשות עם ישראל, עם קודש השם, עם החילוני, בלי תרם, בלי שום דבר לא.
מה גדר האיסור? זה איסור או עניין של חילול השם?
זה הכל, להיות שותף עם חילונים. אני אגיד מילים יותר מדי חריפות. אם היה עובדי, אם מחליטים על הבית איסורי, גם היה שאלה זאת, שבלי הבית איסורי.
האיסור כולל...
היה גם שאלה, כפיר את זה כמו הבית איסורי, עוד יותר גרוע.
האיסור כולל רק להתמודד או גם להשתתף ולהצביע?
אסר מה?
רק להתמודד מטעמם או גם להשתתף ולהצביע?
לא, להיות איתם ביחד בשדות שלהם.
האם האיסור כולל כל אחד ואחד להצביע?
כל אחד ואחד. וכמו שאם היה, היו אומרים שצריך לבוא לבית איסורי, זה היה כולם על כל אחד. ההסתדרות הציונית אומרת שהעם ישראל זה עם של חילונים, וכל אחד צריך להשתתף. אני לא שואל, אנחנו נגד זה.
אנשים שואלים האם זה איסור להצביע?
זה איסור חמור מאוד 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 מאוד.
אומרים שיש גדולי ישראל זצ"ל בדורות האחרונים שהתירו.
הם לא הציגו את השאלה לפניהם כמו שצריך. הם היו מונחים בתיר במצוות, לא הציגו.
ישנם כאלה...
הציגו את זה בצורה לא נכונה.
ישנם כאלו שכבר הצביעו, אבל יש להם אפשרות לבטל את ההצבעה.
חייבים לבטל. חייבים מאוד. אין שום פטור.
Dov Landau said, if you heard the tape, that the Zionists, their goal is, and for this reason, to a certain extent, they created the whole Medina, in order to change us into Amoin and Moav. That was his lashon. Now, isn't that a strange way to describe a shmad? We have lashkicham teresechel avim rechukei ritzaynecha. Imagine saying that the Yevonim wanted to turn us into Amoin and Moav. No, they just wanted us not to keep the Torah. This lashon that you hear not only from Rav Dov Landau, but from everybody, they wanted to turn us into some kind of Amoin and Moav, a Chiloni nation. Why doesn't everybody just say, and everybody describes it that way, and they're right, I'll explain to you what they mean in a moment. Why don't they just say, very simple, they want to shmad us. They want us not to be frum. And by the way, nobody explains when they say this, why they want to shmad us. Like, what do they want? What is their point? So and the truth is, if we don't understand this, it's very hard to fight the Maracha. I have to explain this. I was around 5 years ago when this started, and the same thing is happening now. There's a Ksav Sofer. The Ksav Sofer says that if you makabel Torah from your parents, same thing applies to Rebbeim, but you don't understand it yourself, there are big chesroinus. One chesaron is, he says, you will not be able to give it over to your children. Another chesaron is you won't be able to fight the Yetzer Hara. People can know what the halacha is, for example, or what pshat and tosfos is, but if you don't understand it, there's a big chesaron, you're not going to be able to give it over. It'll only work for you. You won't be able to explain it to your kids. There's a Divrei Cheskel, Shin V'Rov. He says when Avram Avinu was mispal for children, he says, what do you mean? Why was he mispal for children? He had a son, Eliezer, and Talmidim Harehim Kabonim. So the Divrei Cheskel says that Eliezer was not a Talmud, because Eliezer was a doile mitoris rabbi mashkala chayrim. That's a copycat. That's not a Talmud. He just gave over from his Rebbe. He didn't understand it from Zechalein. Yitzchak Avinu fakert, he had a different midah than Avram. He took in Avram's Torahs and he was koine it and he used it. But all Eliezer did was he just said over. And that's not called a Talmud. The Chazon Ish, when he paskins at two places. Chazon Ish, when he paskins a machloikis rishonim, could be there's more, I couldn't tell you, but two that I know of, where he paskins a machloikis rishonim and it says one is very shver, he has kashis, so we can't paskin like that. The Chazon Ish says, because if there's something, somebody says something that's shver, and another rishonim that says something we understand, the rishon that we understand is our Rebbe legabe this inyan. A Talmud has to understand his Rebbe, not merely say it over. And otherwise, you may not understand Bechlal. There was a Maisa with the Satmar Rav, Yekisha Rav. He came to America after the war. His name was Rabbi Avram Meir Israel. Mechaber of a Sefer, Tshuvas Vayan Avram. And the Yekis have a minig that they wear kittel. Everybody in the whole Kehillah on Rosh Hashanah wears a kittel. And now he comes Rosh Hashanah, he's davening Yom Noraim in Williamsburg, and he wants to know, he goes to Satmarav, he says, should I follow Minig Avois or Minig HaMakom? So Satmarav told him, you should follow Minig Avois and not wear a kittel. He says, what do you mean? He says, you think your father's Minig was to wear a kittel? No. Your father's Minig was to do whatever the Minig HaMakom was. Your father always davened by the Yekis, Mamela, he always wear kittel. You should follow that minig, exactly what your father did. Your father followed the minig HaMakom, and you should do the same thing. In other words, if you don't know the pshat, you just have a picture of your father davening with a kittel, you have no musig unless you understand why or what. Listen, it's better than not knowing anything. How many Sfarim Rishonim even, at Shuvas Harash, about how people who paskin shilas from kitzurim without understanding the sugi of mamish the machrivei ha'olam. We know that. The kitzurs are very, very b'diavad. If you're in the middle of Shemon Esrei and you don't know if you have to repeat Yalav Yova and you're in the middle of Shemon Esrei, so what are you going to do? You can't start learning the sugi. So you go to the shelf and you open the Chayodam, and first you'll see the Chayodam holds that if you're in the middle of Shemon Esrei, you don't know the shaila, you're allowed to ask, you're allowed to look it up. That says in Chayes Machloikis, that's Chayodam Shtita. And then you'll see whatever the halach is. So if you're in the middle of Shemon Esrei, you have no choice. Fine. But that's not how you learn a sugi, and that's not how you understand, that's not how you become a Talmud, and that's not how you fight a ma'aracha. I gotta tell you, the idea of the whole ma'aracha that's being fought over here, oh, this one said, and that one said, and this video said, and there's a half a video, so you're medayik in the half a video, and it's over here. And we have 6 videos of these rabbonim, and only 2 videos of those rabbonim, and achay rabbim lahatois, and this gadol said this, but what do you mean? He could have said this. It's not a mahalach, because this is mamish, the Ksav Sofer, the Divrei Cheskel, the Chazon Ish. The Emerson is like this. And hopefully when we leave here this evening, tonight, we're going to understand this. And Reb Dov Landau explained this very well. He just did it very bekitzer. I'm going to base what I'm saying on his shmuz. If somebody were to tell you that Reb Chaim Kanievsky said the bracha on a granola bar is hadama, you could believe him. It's a big suffix, but you could believe him. If somebody told you that Reb Chaim Kanievsky said the bracha on a granola bar is ha'etz, you could believe him. It's a big suffix, but you could believe him. But if somebody told you that Reb Chaim Kanievsky said the bracha on a granola bar is tfilas haderech, you're going to laugh in his face and you won't believe him. And if he tells you that I was there when he said it, you're not going to believe him. And if he shows you, he says somebody I know has a letter that's hidden that says the bracha on a granola bar is tfilas haderech, you're not going to make tfilas haderech on a granola bar. And if you see a letter from him that says the bracha on a granola bar is tfilas haderech, you're going to say, come on, what did they tell him a granola bar is? And then when he say, well, Reb Chaim Kanievsky has Ruach HaKodesh and can't fool him, you're not going to make a tfilas haderech on a granola bar. It's very, very simple. The odds, Rabbi Sai, if Reb Chaim Kanievsky is saying that we should vote in the WZO and we should join it, is less than him saying that the bracha on a granola bar is tfilas haderech. It's just that we know Hilchas Brachas a lot better than we know this. Again, this, even in 1990, Talmidei Chachamim, Rabbonim, Tzadikim had mamish big chesaron of the Yediyas in these things, and here we are, 35 years after that, it's not a kasha what's going on. And they asked Reb Dov Lendau at the end of that 3 minutes whether, he says that people say, he didn't confirm or deny, he said people say they were gedolim from that in the past matter this. He said they couldn't have asked him the question right. They couldn't have asked him the question right. It's very simple. Nobody has a record of what question they asked him. Pick a number from 1 to 10. I'll give you 10 possible questions they could have asked him. Send Charedim into the WZO. We're not making a party. We're not making a party. In the administrative offices in the Israeli government, so it has a connection with the WZO, and if we put Charedim in there, we could be mashpia on them because we could take the funds away, we could fight the reform, we could make sure that the rules, we could actually make rules in the Israeli government for the WZO, and then we could make sure that the rules say, pick a number from 1 to 10. Who knows what they told him? And if you come, and if, I had a question somebody asked me, and Amir Hashem will get to it, but what happened to Ruach HaKodesh? Reb Chaim Kanievsky has Ruach HaKodesh. So there are two mahalochim here, and one is a Dover Poshet. Ruach HaKodesh, if you go to Reb Chaim Kanievsky and you tell him, my wife washed a milcha gedish with a fleshige sponge, and he says you have to throw out the sponge. Then you come home and you tell your wife, Reb Chaim Kanievsky said we have to throw out our sponge. And your wife says, why? And you tell her, well, because it was I said milchige sponge, a milchige sponge, and we washed the fleshige dish with it. And your wife says, no, you're making a mistake, Moshe. It's not a milchige sponge, it's a fleshige sponge. We don't have to throw it out. And the husband says, what do you mean? Reb Chaim Kanievsky has Ruach HaKodesh. Of course, what do you mean? He said throw it out, you have to throw it out. And of course, that's shtusim. Whatever siyata d'shmaya, and there is, that's b'chlal a mistake in Lomdus, but it's a mistake in Tov b'shikol hadas also. Never mind it's a mistake in hashkafa, we'll get there, but it's a mistake in shikol hadas. If you ask a gadol a shaila, he's going to answer the shaila kafi what you asked. I'll give you an example. First of all, it's ma'asim b'chol yoim. Everybody knows the controversy with the human hair sheitlach from India with Rav Elyashiv, right? I was the first one to ask him the shaila. I asked him the shaila. The first tshuva he wrote, mattering the sheitlach, was for me. I was the first one to ask him the shaila. 35 years ago, I think it was, I may be off by a year, 15 years later, a Rav went to Rav Elyashiv and said, the information that you got 15 years ago, the information I gave him, was all wrong. It's not true. Different Metzias. I know the right Metzias. Rav Elyashiv said, also, Rav Feivel Cohen, who I was working with, I was a younger man then, the Shaila Punkt happened to have been landed in my lap. I was working with a lot of Rabbanim. He went to Rav Elyashiv, he was very close with him, and said, but Rav Elyashiv, we know that the Metzias is the other way. And Rav Elyashiv said, this is not his lashon, I'm just paraphrasing here. I'm not the FBI, and I was never in India, and I'm not telling you what the Metzias is. If you ask me a Shaila, I will answer the Shaila based on what you ask me. I'm not telling you what the Metzias is. You ask me a Shaila, I will give you the answer. If you tell me Ruvain killed Shimon, and I'll tell you he's a Roitzeach, and you say, well, no, he didn't kill Shimon, what do you want from me? Let's say a guy comes to my driveway and steals my car, and I say, why are you stealing my car? He says, well, Reb Chaim Kanievsky said I could steal your car. Okay, what exactly happened? Well, I asked him if I find a $5 bill in Times Square, am I allowed to keep it? He said yes. And I said, what? He says, yeah, but I didn't mean a $5 bill, I meant your car. And I didn't mean Times Square, I meant your driveway. And he, what do you mean? So you didn't ask him the right shaila? Oh, what do you mean? You're saying he doesn't have Ruach HaKodesh? He couldn't figure it out? His mamish mavlo harayin such shtusim. You ask a Rav a shaila, he's going to answer the shaila you ask him. He's not going to answer a different shaila. Now, the person who's looking at me with squinty eyes now is thinking about the Groen Mishlei that says that Dayan has siyata dishmaya, that even if somebody tries to fool him, two things. Number one, that siyata dishmaya, if he gets the shaila right, but rayas are wrong, Eidim try to fool him or something. You ask a Rav a shaila, he's going to paskin the shaila. If you ask him a milchig dish with a milchig sponge, and it was really fleishiks, you think he's going to tell you to throw out the sponge? Does that make any sense? Second thing, there's a Groen Mishlei earlier that says that a dayan, not only in order should not be a din meruma, he also has to know the Metzias Klor. He says a Rebbe, a Molamid doesn't have to know Metzias, he just has to know Torah. But a dayan has to know the Metzias also. Otherwise it'll be emes ben emes lamitoy, and it could be a din meruma. If you know the Metzias, then is one thing. But Lamaisa, if you ask a shaila, you're going to get an answer on the shaila. Aside from which, I may as well go into this now. Ruach HaKodesh doesn't work that way. Real Ruach HaKodesh doesn't work that way. What I'm telling you now is in two places. And in the Ben Ish Chai, in his Tshuvas Rav Pa'olim, and Divrei Yoel in Parshas Bahaloischa. The Ben Ish Chai's case was, there's something in the Tshuvas Beis Yosef that the Ben Ish Chai said, B'Shem the Arizal. And the Ben Ish Chai said the Arizal never said it. Somebody asked, but the Beis Yosef quotes him. He said, somebody probably misquoted the Arizal to the Beis Yosef, but the Arizal didn't say such a thing. And then in a further tshuva, somebody asked the Ben Ish Chai, how you talking? Somebody tricked the Beis Yosef? He says, come on, do me a favor, it doesn't work that way. Even a Novi can say, Hashem Hillel mimeni, Elisha by the Shunamis. The Gemara in Baba Basra, the beginning of Baba Basra, Baba Ben Buta was fooled. Ruach HaKodesh doesn't work that way. It doesn't mean somebody through Ruach HaKodesh always knows everything. It means he knows whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu chooses that he should know. But if HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't choose that he should know a particular thing, he's not going to know it. Ruach HaKodesh does not mean that the Divrei Yoel in Bahaloischa, Reish Lakish, it says, anybody that saw Reish Lakish talking to somebody in the street would lend that person money without Eidim. Why? What's up with Stavka Reish Lakish? So he says the same thing. He goes into Ruach HaKodesh and says Moshe Rabbeinu. It says by Moshe Rabbeinu that he was Mamana the Dayanim, but Ruach HaKodesh it says in Rashi. But then then in Devarim it says that Moshe Rabbeinu demanded people who are Yadum l'Shivteichem. And Rashi says it means that if somebody is covered with his talis, I don't recognize him. I need people that actually know him. I'm unable. Ruach HaKodesh. So he says, yes, same thing like Elisha. Bal Ruach HaKodesh does not always know everything. That's the fact. It's not true that a Bal Ruach HaKodesh knows everything if he closes his eyes. Only what Hashem lets him know. And that's why Reish Lakish was different than all the other Amoraim. Reish Lakish had Ruach HaKodesh, but so did the others. Reish Lakish had a Maila, though, over the other Amoraim, Legabe, knowing the Teva of Ganovim. What was his Maila? He was one of them himself. He knew the Metzias, he had experience. So Mela, Reish Lakish had experience. Besides Ruach HaKodesh, he also had experience. It's a long arichas over there if you want, but this is not how Ruach HaKodesh works. And if you want to know when HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it, in Vayoel Moshe, the Satmar Rav brings from a Haflaw, it's Bavoin Hador, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if Hashem, the Siyata Dishmaya that the Gedolim of a door have depend upon the Schusim of the door. If a door is not Zoicha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blinds the eyes of the Manhigim. Sai Lagabe, Metziastika, things everybody knows. The Gemara in Gittin by Kamsam Bar Kamsur, Yochanan ben Zakkai did not ask Aspasionis to go home, and the Gemara says, why not? even though he was granted a wish. And one teretz in the Gemara is a pasuk in Mishlei, Meshiv Chachamim Ochur V'dai Tom Yisokel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't allow him to think of the right answer, the right metzias. It's something that everybody here in this room could have thought of, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu blocked it from him. The Maharsha says because it was an oynish. But the Haflah says even legabe it's mashma, even legabe Torah things. That's pshat, he says, in the Par Helam Dovar. You have a whole Sanhedrin HaGadol. How is it possible? Par Helam Dovar. He also uses it to explain Shaul HaMelech, who said, who didn't kill all the animals of Amalek because Yeresi Asam, he said. Shaul HaMelech, hayi tochen. He said, besides Yeresi Asam, whatever that means, the Dakas Shebadakas, every time we see this, it's all ba'avoin hador. These things happen. I'm going to go into the inyan that's Nageya. I'm going to explain what Zionism is, and the reason why it's such a chomer dikazach over here is because not merely the etzem voting in the WZO. If somebody understands the sugya, I can't believe it's possible for somebody who understands the sugya of what Zionism is and understands the metzias of all the details of what's going on to say that this is mutter. And that's what Reb Dov Landau said. You don't need any other terutzim there. That's what he said. It's very pashut. But it's nageya mamish yisoidis. I have a question. When the Rambam wrote Hilchas Yisoidei HaTorah, what are Hilchas Yisoidei HaTorah? I know what Hilchas Tefillin are. It's halachas of Tefillin. I know what Hilchas Shabbos is. It's halachas of Shabbos. But what are Hilchas Yisoidei HaTorah? It's not the Yud Gimel Ikrim. The Rambam didn't write the Yud Gimel Ikrim in Hilchas Yisoidei HaTorah. They are in Hilchas Tshuva, buried. If you count when the Rambam says this guy's an apikairis and this guy's a kaifer and this guy's a min, if you count those things, they are 13. Those are Yud Gimel Ikrim. But what are Yisoidei HaTorah? So the Torah says the Rambam wrote a letter to his son, and he says that if you have a kasha on something, and it's a kasha on one of the Yisoides, don't change the Yisoid. Learn a different pshat in a pasuk. A Yisoid is the pshat like this. It's very simple. If you have a Yisoid, the taich of a Yisoid is something that other things are built on. Everybody, if you have 100 Gemaras, that a toisus that's paket from 100 Gemaras, right? And you want to know, and you have a Talmud Chacham and an Amoritz, and they both know the Gemaras and they both know the toisvis. The difference is Talmud Chacham knows you have a shver toisvis. The Amoritz thinks you have 100 shver Gemaras. If you have 100 Gemaras and a toisvis fakert, the first line of action is to figure out another pshat and toisvis. That you have wrong pshat and toisvis. Yisoidei HaTorah are things that aren't the things themselves. These things, other things are geboit on. And these Yisoidei HaTorah aren't an individual halacha, although there are individual halachas that have others that are totally in them too. But every single one of these Yisoidei HaTorah have mamish, many things in the Torah that are totally in them. And this thing, what's going on with the WZO, is mamish toli in Yisoidei HaTorah. You know, in the Erech Shai, he says in Even Ho'ezah, Yud Zayin Dachzach, that even though a Rav is allowed to paskin a Shaila, even though he's Nageya B'dover for the Shaila, but a Shaila that's Nageya, Kol Yisrael L'chol HaDoiris, he should not. If he's Nageya B'dover. It's Shaila that's Nageya Basa B'cholov, or an Aguna even, or even a Chomer Dikazach, that's one thing. But a Shaila that's Nageya for Gans Klal Yisrael L'chol HaDoiris, someone who's Nageya B'dover should not pass, meaning it's a much more Chomer Dikazach. He brings the Gemara beginning of Ksubas, that if somebody lives Kol Yom of Be'eser, it's a more Chomer Dikazach. This Shaila over here that Klal Yisrael is right now facing is a Shaila that's Nageya Kol Yisrael L'chol HaDoiris. This is a pirza that's not like smartphones or like lace shetels, where you're going to have some people that are going to do it, some people won't do it, so the ones that do it. This is Klal Yisrael deciding who they are, who they belong with, where they belong, and it's Nageya all the Doiris. And now we're going to start. Normally a shmad works where somebody forces you or tries to convince you not to fulfill the Torah. The Zionist Shmad was a different story. They tried that and it didn't work. See, the Zionists were a strange type of Jew. Once upon a time, 400 years ago, let's say, there was no such thing as a Freie Yid. They were Mishumodim, but maybe a few quirky exceptions. But a Yid was a Yid was from. If somebody was Fry, he didn't call himself a Yid. There was certainly no critical mass of non-Frum Jews. Then came political things, emancipation, enlightenment, where all over Europe they had revolutions where everybody had freedom of religion, and the Jews had more freedoms. They were stuck in ghettos beforehand, and by the way, they wanted to go into the ghettos. Not only Goshen, which was the first ghetto, but about 1,000 years ago in Spain, the Jews actually asked, in order to stay away from the Goyim, they wanted to stay in enclosed places. And there was a Goyish professor, a professor of non-Frum, a professor of Goyish history. His name was Salo Baron. He had a good word. I say it b'shem Omroi. He said that the locks on the inside of the ghetto doors were stronger and were there before the locks on the outside. The ghetto was designed to keep things out of the ghetto, not to keep the people in from going out. It was designed as a Gedarim and Siyagim. But later it became an oppressive situation. Jews were allowed to go out, Jews were allowed to go to universities, and there are plenty of Jews that said freedom of religion, freedom from religion, la Yehudim. And they thought in their Amaratzis that now they're going to be mamish just like Goyim. And the Goyim will love them. But it didn't work out that way. The Goyim, particularly a wave of anti-Semitic pogroms in Russia starting in the year 1881, gave these people a big identity crisis. They said, we don't understand. Why are they attacking us? Those Frum Jews, they're the ones who they should hate. And by the way, there came a whole cascade of reasons why these people believed that Jews should be hated. They understood Jews are disgusting, Jews are ugly, Jews are immoral. That's why they didn't want to be Jews. To them, the Frum Jews were like that. And of course they're hated. Said Vladimir Jabotinsky, the guy who Reb David was talking about, from the founding fathers of Zionism. One of his Talmidim Mufhakim was the father of, we're not in a base medrash, I can mention these guys' names, of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. His father was a Talmud Muvak of this Jabotinsky, and he considers himself a Talmud of him. He said that the Jewish people are nasty people. Its neighbors hate it, and they're right. At the end, the Goyim will kill them. He wasn't the only one. His Jabotinsky gave a hesped on Herzl. A hesped. Herzl died in 1904. And this Jabotinsky guy made a hesped on him, and he said, what is a Zionist? He called them Ivrim. Ivrim, like Hebrews, because that's more of a national name. In Kol HaTorah Ivri is only used when Jews speak to Goyim, or like from a Goyish perspective. With one exception, that Siv said, Eved Ivri, because it's lower Madrega. Other pshat is because he's not chayiv and tayag mitzvahs, can marry shivcha, but Ivri means more of like a national thing rather than a religion. That's how they call themselves, the Zionists. If you want to know what an Ivri is, there's no way to be masig it. Here's what you have to do. He said, quote, he says, you have to use a mahalach of ipcha mistavra. That's a quote. In those days, they knew these Lashonis. Take a Zhid, that's a derogatory name for Jew in Russian, and take every characteristic that he has. Imagine its exact opposite. That's a Zionist. A Zhid is ugly, a Zionist is handsome. A Zhid is cowardly, a Zionist has courage. A Zhid runs scared from everybody. He's weak, he's pale, a Zionist has colors and he's strong. And This was Herzl. Herzl was a real Zionist because he was the opposite of a Jew. The goal of Zionism was to show the Goyim, we are not like those other Jews. We're going to be the opposite. Why do you hate us? We are going to be real people. We're going to be more Goyish than the Goyim. And it wasn't be'etzem because of anti-Semitism that they were trying to make a safe place. Max Nordau, who was the lieutenant of Theodor Herzl, said at the first Zionist Congress, this WZO was voting for the Zionist Congress, at the first Zionist Congress that they opened up, he said, quote, "It's incorrect to say that Zionism is a gesture or an act of desperation against anti-Semitism. In the case of most Zionists, the effect of anti-Semitism was only to force them to reflect upon their relation with the nations. And their reflection led them to conclusions which would remain a lasting acquirement of their mind and heart, even if anti-Semitism would disappear completely from the earth." In other words, anti-Semitism is a siman, not a siba, for Zionism. It was a siman that there's something wrong with the Jews. And of course we know what there's wrong with the Jews. Jabotinsky said, they're ugly people and their neighbors hate it and they're right. If the tables were turned and we were and others were like the Jews, asks Yosef Chaim Brenner, another big Zionist from the Ovois, the original Tzionim HaKadmoinim, if others were like the Jews, wouldn't we hate them as well? Uri Tzvi Greenberg, another one of these guys, shares with us his opinion as to why frum Polish Jews were persecuted. Quote, "Those loathsome Jews were vomited out by any healthy group and states, not because they're Jews, because of their Jewish repulsiveness. The Zionists were secularized Jews who were makabel, accepted, believed in spades the anti-Semitic tropes against the Jews. They believed Jews were disgusting and ugly. Their midas were horrific. They were weak. They were cowardly. You have to be a man. Cowardly is a word that came up a lot. And Chaim Nachman Bialik, the Zionists' greatest poet, a Talmud, Rachmana litzlan, once upon a time of Volozhin, wrote a poem called, in English, it's City of Slaughter, about a pogrom. And the pogromniks come in and they kill the men, their ma'anis, the women, and the husbands run and hide under cracks and under tables and stuff, and they're watching everything happen. And they're sitting there watching and doing nothing. And he describes in lurid detail what's going on, and they do nothing. After it's done, he says, it's all over, they get up and they say, okay, life goes on, but one thing, they have to go to the Rav and ask, am I mutter to my wife now? This is how it ends. That's how the story ends. Then he says, let fists fly at the Kisei HaKavod. That's a quote. We're not like these guys. We're going to be strong. Remember Yaakov Avinu. All the Jews feared Zach like Yaakov Avinu. We're not going to do that anymore. In fact, we're going to be the opposite of them. Zionism was designed as a way to change the personality and the midas of the Jews. It was designed to, they tried to assimilate. Why didn't they just shmad themselves? The answer is they tried and it didn't work. And they figured, you know what the problem is? We can't do it alone. They still look at us as Jews. They still look at us as those guys, like the guy, like us. They still look at us like us. We have to convince the Jews to change. We have to change the Jews. We have to make them normal. We have to make them want to fight. In particular, there are various different hashkafas that the Zionists wanted to eradicate from the Jews. Number one, we don't act like Yaakov Avinu. Yadayim Yadei Esav. We hit back. That's what the Chafetz Chaim was talking about. Jabotinsky died, I think, 1930. Herzl, 1904. It was that tkufa that the Chafetz Chaim wrote that. We hit back. And then they're going to be scared. We know that not only is that against the Torah and Golus, it's counterproductive. It's like hitting a bear. We got to play dead. They didn't care. The fact that the Jews wanted to sit and learn a whole day, there's no such thing in history of, even though Jews were smart, we were educated, compulsory education started by the Kohen Gadol Yeshua ben Gamla. In Europe, it started in the mid-1800s. The European Goyim didn't know how to sign their name. That's why they made an X. Yidden, any town that didn't have a Tinoike Shal Beis Rabban was Machriven Oisoi, or Machriven Oisoi, or Machrimen Oisoi. But there's no fiction literature of the Jews. Did the Jews produce fiction literature? No. It wasn't Nageya to us. Architecture, art, pictures, whatever, even things you're allowed to do. No, we didn't do it. We were Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kodosh. The Zionists hated this, and they figured this is why the Jews are hated. They deserve to be hated. They're not strong. They're not men. They don't want things that normal people want. They don't want to win gold medals. They don't want to win Olympic, the Nobel Prizes. They don't want to win Eurovision song contests. They don't want to have a strong army. They don't want the covet of all the Bulvan Goyim to be machshiv them. What do they want? They're sitting, learning, davening. We got to change them. We have to change them. And so they figured out a way to do it. There are various different shittas, by the way, various different shittas amongst the assimilated. What to do? Some held from communism, which is why there were a lot of Jewish communists at the beginning, and because communism, if you believe in it, everybody's treated equal. The Zionists held that there was a movement in those days called nationalism. It's very important that we understand it. It used to be in the olden days before nationalism. Everybody was he had a king. If he fought a war, it was the king's war. He was the king's subject. There was no such thing as an Englishman. You weren't proud of being an Englishman. You were proud of being king, I don't know what, George's subject. Nationalism came, and French Revolution, 10 years before the American Revolution, and there was this new shita in Europe, a new shita. The shita is everybody is a national of something. It's part of your identity. You're an Englishman, and you're proud of it. Mamash new shita. And you're fighting the war for England, not for a king. It came together with democracy and enlightenment, and it was a lot of the philosophers in those days held it was a substitute for religion. At the same time, you got freedom of religion. They needed some kind of, the neshama needs something to fill it up. V'gam hanefesh lo yismolei. So mamela, they came with this nationalism that we love our land, and there was this shita nationalism that there's a land that unifies people, and when a people live on a land and they speak the same language and they have the same culture, there's some mystical bonds between them, a connection. And you're an American, I'm an American, you're a Spanish guy, I'm a Spanish guy, and they had various different shitas like anything else, big machloikesin. There are those that held that this is etzem, like a biological thing, that there's such a thing as a biological Englishman. Mamish, like, that's racism. This started the Nazis. The Nazis took this shita to an extreme, that there's something, it's called organic nationalism. Then there's liberal nationalism, where we're just a team. But we're a team, but we're connected to our land, and the land gives birth to the nation. Then land, it's like, there was a shita, pagans, like it was like a pagan, a German type of nationalism, where land, the person has some kind of mystical connection, like not a neshama, but it doesn't make any sense, fine. But this is the Metzias. And they said, you know what? We have a great idea. Here was the shmad. What did I just say are the components of a nation? A land, a language, a culture. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take the Jews, and we want to make them normal. What we're going to do is, we're going to make them internationals. They have a land, it's called Eretz Yisrael. What's Eretz Yisrael? Eretz Yisrael is a big Beis HaMedrash. It's a Mokum Kodesh. It's a place where tzaddikim go to do mitzvahs. It's a place of avodas Hashem. This pagan idea that it's in France, in French and other languages, they call it a fatherland. In Russian, it's Mother Russia. In English, it's called a homeland. If anybody thinks Eretz Yisrael, forget Israel, Eretz Yisrael is our homeland, you're making a big mistake because you don't even know what you're saying. Tell me, how do you say homeland in Lashon HaKodesh? If Eretz Yisrael is a homeland, surely it should say something to that effect in some sefer. Well, you're not going to find the word in Lashon HaKodesh because in English it popped up in the 1600s because this is a nationalist word. In modern Hebrew, they call the homeland Moledet, the place you were born. Eretz Yisrael became not a place of Kedusha and Avodas Hashem. It became the fatherland of the Jews, the motherland of the Jews. There's some kind of organic connection, a goyish connection between the Jews and the land. And in fact, in Israel's Declaration of Independence, it says at the beginning, here the nation was born. Here the nation was born. Not at Har Sinai, Hayoim Hazeni Yesalam, but here the nation was born. And they by the way, many of you probably have been in Eretz Yisrael, right? And I'm saying this Vort B'Shem Omroi, my son, noticed it, and I'm very proud of him because we told this to Reb Moshe Sternbach, and he never noticed it, and various others never noticed it, but it's a klorazach. My son went to learn by Reb David, and he calls me right after he lands, about a day after, and he says, Tati, the propaganda over here, you have no idea what it's like. I said, what did you see in one day? So they had a map, and they're looking at the streets in Yerushalayim. He says, there is no street named after Moshe Rabbeinu in all of Yerushalayim. Does anybody know of a Rechav Moshe Rabbeinu? Does anybody know of a Rechav Avram Avinu? How about Yitzchak? Yaakov? There is Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, but if you look at the blue sign on the corner, it says Echad Meshiv Te Yisrael, not B'nai Shel Yaakov Avinu. The names start with Rechav bin Nun. Jewish history starts in Zionist schools with Yeshua. This is the propaganda, and it's not coincidence. Everybody knows this. All the Israeli political scientists will tell you that Heinrich Gretz, who was the first one to invent Zionist Jewish history, starts his gigantic, multi-volume history of the Jews with Yeshua. And the difference between Zionism and secularism, they didn't want just the Jews should be secular. Secularism is a mistake. It's true, you surely have heard of people that said, there are people in public school, Chilonim, that never heard of Moshe Rabbeinu, right? I saw recently from Reb David Soloveitchik, that there was a guy he heard of that didn't know anything about Moshe Rabbeinu, never heard of him, until he saw Moshe Rabbeinu in a movie. That's the first he heard of Moshe Rabbeinu. The problem is not merely that these guys didn't hear of Moshe Rabbeinu. The problem is they didn't hear about Moshe Rabbeinu, but they did hear of Yeshua. In Israeli schools, everybody heard of Yeshua. How Yeshua was the Jewish hero who conquered the land. They heard of Bar Kochba. They heard of the Bar Yonim, and they have a history. They have people that say Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai ruined everything. In fact, they had a youth group, Bris HaBar Yonim was called. I'm not joking. They're proud of it. They even had an anthem. I'll tell you the words. I'm not good at singing. Kamnu shavnu tzeirei onim, kamnu shavnu anachnu bar yonim. Legolet artzenu b'sa'ar milchama, tovim et nachlatenu b'yad ramah. And the chorus goes, B'dam va'esh Yehuda nafla, B'dam va'esh Yehuda takum. Milchama la dror, dror means freedom, like more dror. Milchama la dror, l'artzenu milchama, v'met ha-dror, yechi ha-nekama. Im mishpat ein ba'aretz, yishpot ha-cherev, v'lu nipol kachoil, mizchuyotenu lo neref, like herifai. These guys wanted to be both. Now there are different shittas amongst the Zionists. There were others that said the Bar Yonim are bad guys. Those were the communists, the socialists. They had the left and the right. This is the right-wing Zionists who today are running the show in Israel since 1977 when Menachem Begin was elected. But this is exactly what they wanted. The problem is not secularism. The problem, they do know about Yeshua, and they have a Tanakh bee where people learn psukim and read psukim. And in the Jerusalem program of the WZO that you have to sign, it says that Israel is made on the vision of the prophets. What that means, not the Torah, the prophets who preached in Zionist and even Reform ideology, they preach morals and stuff like that. This is the vision of the prophets, that's what it means, a moral thing. Moshe Rabbeinu is not part of Jewish history. There is Grad, the one neighborhood we found on a map that has 4 streets, a new neighborhood, I don't know how new, that has Sor Rivka Rochaleah Street, like right next to each other. But aside from that, before Matan Torah, there's nothing there. This is Zionism. They have a very strong Jewish identity, very, very strong Jewish identity. They will die for their land. They will die for their land. There's the Beitar youth group, which was recently resurrected, was named not only after Beitar, the Bar Kochba Beitar, but also Bris Trumpador it stands for. There's a Zionist hero, Trumpador his name was. He was a Russian soldier before the Medina came into existence. He died in a battle in Tel Chai, and the legend, the Zionist legend, they have their mices also, their falsche mices, the Mamish Baba mices, that his blood went into the ground and out came, it fertilized the ground, out came red flowers. This symbolism is this pagan connection to the land. They have a very strong Jewish identity. The only thing is, it's not our Jewish. They said, let's change Eretz Yisrael from a holy land into a national homeland. Let's change L'Shain HaKodesh into a national language. And so you know how you say a tie in a soccer game in Ivrit? Teku. You know how you say a Baba Maisa? Agoda. Yeah, that's right. And you know how, you know what? You know how you say bah, as if, like Ki'ilu, Kavyochel. And this Rasha ben Yehuda who did this on purpose. Because two things. They did not want to be Jews, but they were stuck being Jews because the Goyim wouldn't let them be Goyim. So they figured, let's change the Jews. We have Eretz Yisrael. We have L'Shain HaKodesh. We have Ahavas Yisrael. One Jew now is going to relate. You know how little people know about Zionism? So in the Kovitz Maimorim from Rebbe Chonon, it says that Zionism was started over there in Russia by a guy, it says he's by Baal HaShachar HaYodua. Who's Baal HaShachar HaYodua? So that was a bocha. There was an English translation of the Ikvis of the Mashiach. It's called Epic of the Messiah. And in there, it's written by Rebbe Chanan's son. And in there it says that it's Theodore Herzl, and he was called Herald of the Dawn. And I assumed when I was in Masifta that that's what it was. I got older, Lahadam, Herald of the Dawn, Herzl, what, when. Then there was another printed by Rebbe Chanan's son had a yeshiva in Los Angeles. There's a guy here, CIS Publishing, made a new, much more user-friendly translation of Ikvis of the Mashiach, sent it out, they left that sentence out. I'll tell you what it means. It meant Peretz Smolenskin, who had a newspaper called Hashachar. That was Baal HaShachar HaYodua. This Peretz Smolenskin said that after we get Zionism off the ground, then it doesn't matter if you're from or not from, you're all the same, but the ikar is you have to have loyalty to the country and loyalty to the Am, loyalty to the folk, loyalty to the people. Who's a good Jew and who's good to the Jews? Somebody who likes the Jews. Hashem doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you like the Jews, then you're a good Jew. If you don't like the Jews, you're a bad Jew. It doesn't. Hashem is not in the picture anymore. Because now you have, and what mitzvah they're going to change is going to be a Ahavas Yisrael. So Eretz Yisrael used to be, for Klal Yisrael, a Makom Kodesh. The Zionists changed it into a national homeland. You know what? We'll let Reb Moshe Feinstein explain what Eretz Yisrael is. And I have over here in front of me Koil Rom, Reb Moshe's, they wrote over from his Torah's Parshas Bechukoisai. And he says, B'hakomas kol uma v'uma sheba oilam. You know what, in order to save time, I'll just say it in English. For every nation in the world, we find that they need their yisoid on two things. One is a gashmiistic thing, that they should have a land, that they sit there in security, and they protect themselves from other umois. And the second thing is a ideological, Ruchnius says here, means an ideological thing. They have a shita. America is democracy. There's communism. There's freedom of speech. You have to have a physical land, and you have to have a shita. That's an umo. Avol Yisoid Klal Yisrael Hoyu Kishabo Bebris Am Hashem the Kibul Aleim Es HaTorah. Klal Yisrael Hayoim Hazeh Niyeh Salam LaHashem Elokecha. By Kabbalas HaTorah. That's what made us into an Am. Ve'eluheim divrei Rav Sajigoin. Rabbi Say, remember these words of Rav Sajigoin, because every single Bali Guzma, every single Gadol that spoke against Zionism used these words of Rav Sajigain. Because what I'm telling you, that they changed Klal Yisrael into a nationality from just the Am HaTorah. They changed Eretz Yisrael into a national homeland. They changed Lashon HaKodesh into Ivrit. They changed Ahavas Yisrael into national solidarity, is the Avodah Zarah of Zionism. As you will see shortly, this is the real Avodah Zarah. And anybody who's nichshul in any of this, whether you're frum or not, that is the Avodah Zarah of Zionism. It doesn't matter if you are, I'm not joking, Reb Elchanan, Reb Reuven Grozovsky, Reb Moshe Feinstein, he will speak about Eretz Yisrael now. Satma Rav quotes this Rav Sajigain too, and he says nationalism is their Avodah Zarah, which is why they're so opposed to speaking Ivrit. Why did they invent Ivrit? They invented Ivrit because without a language, you cannot be a people. That the whole thing is designed for shmad, the whole language. Never mind those few words that I told you. I'm talking about the language itself was invented for that, and it was invented in order to give us a nationalist feel of ourselves. And every Reb Amram Blau in the Neturei Karta use these two things. Hayoim hazeh niyeh salam, ba'Kabbalas HaTorah, the Gemara Bracha says it means, and Rav Sajigain, ein umoiseinu umo ela b'soirasa. Rav Sajigain there is talking about another religion that says, I guess it's the Muslims or something like the Muslims, that says that Hashem chas v'sholem took the Torah and gave it to another people. And Rav Sajigain says it can't be, and he brings many rayas. One of the rayas is he has psukim in the Torah that the Jews will always exist forever. And had Hashem chas v'sholem taken the Torah and give it to somebody else, we would not be Jews. It's not the pshat we're a Jewish people and we have a Torah, the way the Greeks have their religion, or the Spanish people have their religion. Without the Torah, there are no Jews. If you do not believe in the Torah, you do not believe there's a Jewish people. Zionism means you believe there's such a Metzias as the Am Yisrael, even if there's no Torah. Gendict, finished. Very simple. The Jews are a nationality. The country of these people is Israel. The language of these people is Ivrit, but the people exist. That's what Zionism was. That's what it is today. That's all it ever was. Everything else is a totzah of that. According to us, Einu moiseinu umo ela b'soirasa, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the Torah. That's all that we have in common. What connects me with you is the Torah. What connects me with you is the Torah. What connects me with Eretz Yisrael is the Torah. What connects me with Lashon HaKodesh is the Torah. Every single thing, if you say the word Jewish, it has to do with Hashem and the Torah. Otherwise, the word Jewish doesn't make sense. Jewish anything. There's no such thing as a Jewish tree. No such thing. Jewish means Torah. That's all it means. Zionists said no. And why did they do this? Because they said, well, sure, if we get the Jewish, then Reb Moshe says this, listen to this. After he says Am Yisrael is Ein Moisein Umo Ela B'Soirasa, he talks about Eretz Yisrael. Nimtza Sham Yisrael Nasel Am Hashem Kishoyu Bamidbar Koidim Shenichnesu Eretz Yisrael. Veinam Tzrichim Liyisoid Gashmi Shetia Lohem Eretz Shalahem Sheyoshvim Sham B'Chazaka. The Jews do not need a land to be an Am Yisrael. We do not need it. We became Am Yisrael before there was Eretz Yisrael. There are Mefarshim that say Dafka Hashem did it in the desert, where there is no country, no anything, to show us that we and the Torah, that's Am Yisrael. But continue. The Eretz Yisrael, listen to this. Ein in yono l'tzorech hakomas ha'uma. V'rak l'tzorech kedushasa v'kiyum mitzvayseha. Eretz Yisrael is a tool for us to fulfill Torah. It is a way, it is a chefsa de mitzvah, and it's a tool for us to be mekayim other mitzvahs. And then he says like this, Ve'ein lohem eretz leid nichshavim li'ameh sheyisoid mashen ikroim klal Yisrael uma hu machmas hayisoid haruchni shel Torah. And then he says, you want a yisoid gashmi? I'll give you yisoid gashmi too. It's from Reb Moshe Feinstein. Hayisoid hagashmi shel klal Yisrael hu al yidei hachzokas haTorah. That's the Gashmistic Yisoid. Hachzokas HaTorah. Torah and Hachzokas HaTorah. And anything, because being a Jew means, a Jew is a taich. You're chayiv in the mitzvahs. You have a bris with the Rabbeinu Shalom. Therefore, anything you do because you're Jewish is part of your avodah, part of your religion. Without the religion, there are no Jews. And if you don't believe in Hashem, or if you don't chas v'sholom, if you don't believe in the Torah, You do not believe there exists a Klal Yisrael. If you don't believe in the Torah, you don't believe there was money, you don't believe Moshe split the Yam Suf, and you don't believe there's an existence of a people called Klal Yisrael. If you believe that there's a Klal Yisrael, even though you don't believe there's a Torah, or if you believe that there's an Am Yisrael, some kind of nationality that we have, even if you do believe the Torah, that's a big problem. How big of a problem? So, says Reb Elchanan, says Reb Reuven, said the Priskarov, said the Chazon Ish, all of the above, that's Avodah Zorah. Because anything that you bring into your Jewish identity is part of your religion. If I say because I'm Jewish, listen, if I say I like potatoes, why do I like potatoes? Because I like potatoes. If I say that I have to sweep the floor because the floor is dirty, fine. But I say because I'm Jewish, I have to do this, that thing better come from the Torah. If not, it's Avodah Zarah. Therefore, Zionism is Avodah Zarah. Because Zionism says that we have a homeland, we are an Am, a nation, and when Reb Dov Landau said they want to make us like Ammon and Moav, that was the shmad of the Zionists. That was the shmad. Not that we shouldn't do mitzvahs. The truth of the matter is, back in the olden days, it was not possible to be a Zionist if you did Torah and mitzvahs. Because everybody knew that this is also this day's koizvis, this is avodah zarah, this is kfir and apikorsos. Because again, ein umoiseinu umo el b'soirasa. Remember that. Those 5 words. But then came the religious Zionists, the Mizrachistim, and after the Mizrachistim, others. And when they had the first Zionist Congress and they were deciding what land to get, everybody knows there was a Uganda program, right? I have news for you. The Mizrachistim, Rabbi Reines, he voted for Uganda. And the Mizrach, why? He said, all we want is a safe place. Whatever's safer, Israel's clearly not, and easier, that's what we want. The Zionists, the Freie Zionists, were interested in an identity. So they took the ancient homeland. It's not an ancient homeland, but they made it into an ancient homeland. They hired a guy, Ben Gurion hired a guy, Ben Zion Diener, to make a whole curriculum to explain this. They teach Yedias Haaretz. What's Yedias Haaretz? What plants grow in Israel, in Eretz Yisrael, if you're from Eretz Yisrael. Does anybody care? Does Hashem care if you know what plants grow in Eretz Yisrael? I'll give you a hint. Does Hashem care if you know what color beard the Chafetz Chaim had before it was white? Imagine you have Yedias Gedolim, and instead of learning their Torahs and their Maisim, you learn, look, I'm old enough to remember, okay? Rebbe Ber Wachvogel was blondish. Reb Malkiel was dark brown, okay? This and others, what kind of teeth they had, and what if they lived in a brick house or a wooden house. That's Yedias Gedolim. What kind of crazy thing is that? Well, that's Yedias Haaretz. Those things, these type of flowers grow in Eretz Yisrael, has nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. That is Zionism. And if you want to know if you're a Zionist, if you're affected by this, I mean, the answer is yes. We all are. But here's an example. You know that Eretz Yisrael, the borders of Israel, are not exactly the borders of the Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So Eilat is not part of Eretz Yisrael, and part of southern Lebanon is, right? Okay. So imagine you are in a Lebanese town, an Arab town, Nakora. I actually looked up, there's a town, Nakora, part of Eretz Yisrael, L'chayra. Now, the Rambam says, Tzaddikim used to kiss the ground of Eretz Yisrael, right? So you're in, let's say, Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim's not a raya. You're in Haifa, you're in Lud, wherever it is, you're kissing the ground, right? You're now in Lebanon. And you're walking in the street, and it's an Arab street. And you hear the Arabic music, Halla Walla with Arabic music. And you smell the Nevelis and Treifas. And maybe even pork, because maybe they're not from Arabs. And the women are walking around with the, all covered. And the men are this, right? And it's all Arab. The whole thing is one big Arab shuk, Arabs, and you don't even know what they're saying. You're scared maybe. If you are one drop less comfortable kissing that ground in that Arab town, then it's not Kedushas Eretz Yisrael that you're kissing. Because that ground is Trumas Maestris exactly like anywhere else in Eretz Yisrael. And if you are less bakfeim, less hamish, less comfortable kissing that ground, then it's not Kedushas Eretz Yisrael that you care about. Could be partly. That's the difference between Eretz Yisrael our Eretz Yisrael and Zionism. The Rambam's tzaddikim would have bent down and kissed that land no matter who was there. In fact, when the Rambam said it, most of the time, it wasn't Jews there all the time. So that's one example. I'll give you another example, and how it gets mamish much worse, this nationalism. So the Avodah Zarah of Zionism is to take Eretz Yisrael and make it an Avodah Zarah. It's very easy. The line between Amun and Avodah Zarah is very thin. We know Hashem is a Gibor, right? Hashem is Yodeya. And it's all Kavyochel. If you believe that Hashem has Yediyah like a human being does, or he has Gevura like a human being does, that physical Gevura, you know even Avodah Zarah. That's Hagshama. And that's the Ravid's Meshugana that says, that Hashem has a nose. And even if he's not a min because he was fooled, but has a nose. And by the way, this is a Yesod. And even though somebody shows you in a Pasuk, Hashem has a hand, you're going to say Hashem doesn't have a hand. I don't know Pshat and Pasuk. And it says, V'chora af Hashem. Hashem doesn't really get angry. You're also no even Avodah Zarah if you think it's the type of anger that humans have. And then if he shows you Rashi that says Yad means Yad Mamish, you're going to say, I don't know what Rashi means. I don't care. But it does not mean this, because you know the Yesodis. And even if there's 100 Gemaras Fakert, you're not going to give in. That's what, by the way, if you want to know Pshat and Rashi, I'll tell you later. There's also a Divrei Yoel on that, a beautiful Divrei Yoel, Mamish Pasha Pshat and Rashi. But what they did was they made Eretz Yisrael into an Avodah Zarah. So now we have a Kaisel Maravi, right? There's recently there came out a sefer. The Mashgiach in Staten Island put out a sefer of Maises, things he heard from Reb Moshe and other Gedolim. And in there it says that in 1967, after they made a war and they got the Kaisel, everybody, I remember that. I was a kid, but I remember that. Everybody was dancing. Said, we got the Kaisel, we got the Kaisel, we got the Kaisel. By the way, there was a Choshev Yid, I'm not saying who told this to my shver, we got the Kaisel. And a guy in there, he said, who's we? But never mind we, but never mind that. They were dancing. Now, so in that sefer from the Staten Island Mashgiach, it says they told this to Reb Moshe. And Reb Moshe says, people were killed in a war for the Kaisel. It's not worth one drop of Yiddish blood. Now, if this is a chiddush to you, it's insane. It's insane. People, if you think, never mind a chiddush, if anybody thinks that it's worth a war, and it was a win, because we got a kaisel, never mind the we, because we got a kaisel, you out of your mind? 1,000 Hatzalah workers would be Machal Shabbos each 1,000 times if there's a 1% chance to save one Yid from dying. Is the Kaisel more important than Shabbos? Chil Shabbos is a mitzvah d'oraisa d'Rabbanon? What are you, out of your mind? People think it's a mitzvah, that it was a win, almanas yisoimim, dead people for a Kaisel? You out of your mind? I remember I was once talking, giving a shiur, was broadcast on a radio, it was a Motzei Shabbos, and I was talking about wars, how you're not allowed to make wars in Golus, and somebody called up with a question, but Rabbi, if we wouldn't have gotten wars, we wouldn't have made wars, we wouldn't get the Kaisel. So I told him, first of all, you stop making a toys. Because if we wouldn't have made wars, we would not need a kaisel, because the Bayonim wouldn't have caused the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. We'd have a Beis HaMikdash, we wouldn't have a kaisel. So it's stam a toys. But secondly, I said it was Motzei Shabbos. I said, did you hear Hatzalah ambulance pass your house today? Yeah, Mistama, yeah. You out of your mind for a kaisel, it's worth making a war? Now, if it's a chiddush to you, a drop of a chiddush, what Reb Moshe said, there's something wrong. If there's one thing that Jews, Freie Jews, Fruma Jews, all cries and agree, it's your Machal Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh. Even the Freie, everybody understands that. And even Reb Moshe says, if there's a woman, the husband can go with him, if it's going to be better for her, she'll be nervous, whatever it is. All these Heterim, Hatzalah, Reb Shlomo Zalman, that they could go back home because maybe they'll be discouraged. Even a Mashahu of a and Hashoyel Harizeh Shofech Domim, right? First you ask, first you do, then you ask. But for a Kaisel, you could have Jews killed. It's crazy. Mamish crazy. And if you think that's a drop of a chiddush, people are out of their minds. And I'll tell you two things. You want to hear something worse? So now I have, but the Zionists talk a hold like that. I heard a vort and a maisa from Reb Shimon Schwab. He told me this. And to show you now the Zionists, of course, to them, by the way, the Kaisel became not a holy wall, it became a national symbol. You see, for national symbols, the nafka mina is for national symbols you die for. The flag, you die for the flag. You die for the land. You die for the Kaisel. This is coming from this avodah zarah of nationalism. It's not, if you think that a war is worth it, it's not a din in Hilchas Shabbos that you're off. It's not a din in Hilchas Pikuach Nefesh. It's a din in Hilchas avodah zarah, because it's the nationalism of avodah zarah. Rav Schwab told me a story. He said a vart, mamish a great vart, on Chanukah. He said, it says in Al Hanisam, the whole story, Lashkichem Taresecha Lavim Rechuke Ritzonecha, V'yachar Kain, Bo Bonecha L'dvir Veisecha. Right? Why do you have to have those two words, V'yachar Kain? The whole thing is sequential. This and this and this and this. Everything is V'yachar Kain. Why over there you have those two words? So he said, Chas v'sholom, nobody should think that the reason why we made a war on Chanukah was because the Yevonim took away from us the Beis HaMikdash. They did not. That's not a reason to make a war. Let them have a Beis HaMikdash. To make a war over a Beis HaMikdash? Eitzim v'avonim. Hishlech kasar eitzim v'avonim. It's not worth one Jewish life. Only one thing we would fight for, because they wanted Lashkicham Taresecha Lavim Rechuke Ritzonecha. After they went to war for that, and then Masarta Gibarim Biyad Chaloshim, and the war was over, and now was safe. Achar Kain Bo Bonecha L'Dvir Veisecha. Afterwards, only now they would go into the Beis HaMikdash, because they didn't have to fight for it. It's his own vart, he told it to, but he told me, listen to this. You know, during Hanukkah, there's a Goyish Chaga, the same time comes out, right, more or less. He told me he got in the mail a card. It says, Merry Christmas to our dear friend Rav Schwab. He opens it up, it says, from your dear friends, and had 3 Arab terrorists. If you dare say that you shouldn't fight for Beis HaMikdash, you're a terrorist supporter. What do you mean? Just give them the Beis HaMikdash? This is, and by the way, if you think this is, that guy was some yeki in Washington Heights, just some random crazy person, you should know that in the same Rav Shimon Schwab, I saw in, the Yekis have a newsletter, it's called Metailungen. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. But that's what it looks like, it says on the cover. And Rav Schwab once made a machol against a neighbor of his, somebody who lives in his neighborhood, who wrote an article about, in the I don't know if they still have it, the RJJ Kovetz, in English, Halacha, Contemporary Society, or something like that. So Rabbi Herschel Schechter from Yeshiva University wrote an article in there. If I remember right, it was 1985-86. And he said, what is the heta for Israel to go to war for land? Now you think everything's self-defense? No, he knew better than that. He said the heta is, I think I could quote it actually. Yes, I have it here. In answer to this, now the question is, Jews are getting killed. In answer to this, it would appear that the heart of our preparedness to fight for Eretz Yisrael is the fact that Israel's role today is as the national homeland of the Jewish people. Since a nation's land is vital to its existence as a nation state, to the point where, in limited contexts, only those residing in Eretz Yisrael are considered full members of Klal Yisrael, therefore, conquest by a foreign power is considered a lethal blow to the essence of the conquered nation. Therefore, just as a doctor would amputate a patient's limb in order to save a life, when the life, quote unquote, of an entire nation is endangered, it is permissible to sacrifice the lives of a few for the purpose of saving the nation at large. It's the national home, and you can sacrifice Jews to save the national home. American wouldn't sacrifice. You die for the flag, you die for the land, you die for your country. America had a general Patton, who had a good word. He said, you don't die for your country. The goal of war is to make the other guy die for his country. But people die for your country. And if Israel is fighting for land, Jews die, but at least the national homeland of the Jewish people, which is part of what makes the Jews a nationality, is there. The Mizrachistim, Reb Elchanan, and Reb Baruch Ber, in the back of the Reb Baruch Ber, there's shmuz, and there's a lot about Zionism there. The 3-volume Reb Baruch Bers, the Chazon Ish, the Brisker Rav. It doesn't matter if you're from. The Zionists don't care if you put on tefillin. They don't care if you keep Shabbos. But they want you to think that Jews are brothers in the same way that the Spanish people are brothers. And by the way, does anybody know why Jews are brothers? Where does it say Jews are brothers? Says the Rambam, Perek Yud, Hilchas Matnas Aniyim. All Jews are brothers. Shenemar, bonim atem l'Hashem. Without Hashem, we're not brothers. Without Hashem, we're not Jews. If you don't believe in Hashem and you think Jews are brothers, then you are an idol worshiper. What they did was, they wanted to take the Koisel and make it into something idolatrous. They want to take Eretz Yisrael and make it into an idol. You walk down the streets of Yerushalayim, down Rehov Yafo. Last time I was in Eretz Yisrael, I went to visit my son who was by Reb David when we went to Reb Moshe Sternbach then. But walking down, that was the last time I was there, walking down the street of Rehov Yafo, big street in Yerushalayim. I remember, I saw on the side, on this side, going that way towards the old city, there was this store with didn't have a wall. It was just like a garage. You open it up, and they sold CDs. And from far, it looked like a CD, Nigune Vasikin. Okay, I thought maybe I had a Baruch Ber's Nigune, and what's Nigune Vasikin? I looked closer, I went closer, Nigune Vatican. There's others, they have nightclubs over there. They have other things. Ben Gurion said that we'll know Zionism was a success if you have Zionists speaking Hebrew. Etnan. That's a success because they're speaking Hebrew. Now they're more Jewish. Now if you walk down the streets and you see this stuff, how do you feel? By the way, one of the last stores going right before the Mamiya Mall on the left, Kakoyim, tattoos. That store wouldn't last in Borough Park for 3 weeks. But it's there in Hashem's house. Walking down that street and you see the font, everything is written in the same letters as the Gemara, and it's Eretz HaKodesh. And do you feel disgusted because HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home is being desecrated that way? How the land screams in agony because of what they're doing in it? Like they brought a tselem into the Beis HaMikdash? Or do you feel more comfortable because this is our land? I have over here a Reuven Grozovsky Sefer Boyas Hazman, which discusses the WZO, by the way, and for the most frequently asked question that I've received is, what's the difference between the WZO and Israel's Knesset? Which I will answer, but first I want you to understand the sugya. So he says like this. And he describes all of this, everything I said, the whole history. The language is a little hard and it's very bekitzer, and he assumes the reader has a lot of ideas, which we don't usually. And he says like this. Ubezeh motza klipas noiga. Ki heim mitzidam einam tzrichim levatel adas klum ki atzlam hasafa v'haaretz heim dvarim chiloiniyim. To them, the language and the land are secular things. Ula neshama ha-Yisraelis harizeh sipuk ruchni. And for a Jewish neshama, that can give them fake, it's ruchniistic sipuk. Shehare gam chelik maha-Torah. It's also a chelik from the Torah. Ula maisa hare yisayu gam ha-machzikim b'Torah mishemahava tzion v'yishuv Eretz Yisrael. V'oz yotzu ha-goinim v'ha-gedolim v'osru l'hishtatef imohem. B'cheftzas rayoinam u'b'maasehem. And all the gedolim came out and asked having anything to do with them. Ki ro b'zeh reform yoiser gedolim izu shel ha-reformim. This is a worse reform than reform. B'hachrazosam ki loy am ha-Torah anachnu elo am bal regesh leumi. We're a nationality. We're an ethnicity. We're anything. If you believe there's any connection between Jews other than or besides the Torah, that's avodah zarah. I want to tell you, how do you stop this shmad? I'll give you a mashal for this type of avodah zarah. I'll show you how literally it's meant. The Mishnah Brura in Hilchas Kriyas HaTorah talks about how the bima has to be in the middle of the shul. We all know the maskilim wanted the bima to be in front. It was a copy of the churches, right? So the Bir Halacha says they're very bad guys, these people, and in 3 places says the Chasam Sofer Imreyesh and Sefer Mecholos HaMachanayim. It was a Talmud of the Chasam Sofer, Gnus Oisam HaNoshim. I have the Sefer Mecholos HaMachanayim here with me. He discusses Bima Be'emtza in Siman Hey. He says like this: it's all about the Maskilim, the Sefer, and why they're bad, Api Halacha, Hashkafa, Nigla, Nistar, everything they do is bad. Somebody asked the Mecholos HaMachanayim, he says, even though the Maskilim are bad, but they do have a milah that we don't. The Maskilim, they're always quiet in shul. They never talk. They come to shul always with decorum. So should we give them credit for that? Anybody learning Yevamis over here? So he has the Gemara in Yevamis Davov, as Mikdoshai Tiro, V'Shavsoisai Tishmaru, that you're not supposed to have moira for the Mikdosh, but moira for Hashem. Tosfos asks on top of Amud Beis that why didn't the Gemara say the same thing by moira Av? Why only by moira Mikdosh? So Tosfos says nobody would have a Havamina to make his father into an Avodah Zarah, but the Beis HaMikdash, yes. Says the Mecholos HaMachanayim. What does Tosfos mean? How do you make the Beis HaMikdash into an Avodah Zarah? He says, I'll tell you. He says, any action that you do because you're Jewish, any religious action has to be connected to Hashem. If it's not Yiras Shamayim, then it's Avodah Zarah. And therefore, these maskilim that come in, listen to this. V'zeh im ro'isa odom she'enoi nizer bahar be'aveirus chamurois. V'yavoi lebeis ha'knesses. V'yamoid shom be'emo yiseru gedoyla. This guy's not so frum. He comes to Beis Medrash and he stands there. V'lo yonud v'lo yonua. V'lo yasiach chas v'sholom sicha kala ka'oimin lefnei hamelech. V'yachakach yetze lechutz v'yishtes tam yenom. V'kol shekeinim chel Shabbos. Emonor li achi. Manish tana mitzvah zu shel moira beis hakneses mikol aveirus shebekol haTorah kula. V'chihi chamura shebechamurois. Asher ikrei haTorah hishlachto v'sicha kalo atonizer. Mizen neda asher lochei nizer bo yan moira mokom oleha. It's not because of Yiras Hashem that you're quiet. It's because you're in awe from the synagogue. Kishom niroloi she'oimid eitzel Hashem. And even if you think, because in the synagogue is a place where people walk into the synagogue, even a goyim, they put on yarmulkes sometimes when speaking to. If you go into the synagogue and even you think Avol Malkoy Tzmunus Hashem Yabet Eitzel Malkoy Tzmunus Hashem Yabet Lenegere Einov Shom Hu Doichet. But the truth is, even though this yira and pachad that he's feeling in the synagogue, because it's clearly not Yiras Shamayim, because he doesn't have yira from Hashem, he has yira from this binyan. Therefore, listen to this. He's doiche, because he's doiche the raglei shchina l'chein magio leha yiru v'pachad godel k'moi kol balei hamagashmim kishaoimdim neged tmunosom beima yiseir, like all oivdei avodah zarah when they stand in front of their avodah zarah. V'olav hakosav oimer v'yirosoi kisaltoi v'omnom ilu hoyo eileha moira mitzvah im kein moira beis haknesses hu mitzvah k'moi Shabbos. But if you don't have moira mitzvah, then your moira beis hamikdash is avodah zarah. V'im kein sefer Torah shaloi osor bahano. If he owns it, of course, right? Ubeis haknesses hu shaloi hu tzelem b'seiser halev. He says the Sefer Torah is mamish and avodah zarah. Now let's say I wanted to shmad the Jews and I wanted to make them into, I don't know what, Beis HaMikdashists, synagogists. And I talk about how holy a Beis HaKnesses is in a Beis Medrash, and I bring all the Chazals. And when you're in the Beis HaMedrash or Beis HaKnesses, you have to have Ema, Yira, Reses, and Zeya, but it's not because of Yira Shamayim, because other mitzvahs are not, but it's because of the great awe of the Beis HaMedrash, I just shmatted you. And he says that's what's Pshat and Tosfos, why you can make a Beis HaMikdash into an Avodah Zarah. If a guy does Anvir Shemayim and he sees a Beis HaMikdash and he's so in awe, and then suddenly he starts becoming more from, he's an Oiver Avodah Zarah. How do you protect against such a shmat? That is the shmat of the Zionists. Hold on, later. Now, let's go to today's Zionists. Let's go to the organization. The Zionists today decided that not merely are the Jews a nationality, but the Jews are a nationality and they have a state, they have a country. The country is Israel. Israel, by its own law, by the way, is not the country of its citizens. In Israel, there are different categories how they categorize people. There's Das, religion. There's L'um, your nationality, and there's Ezrach, your citizenship. Now, if you have an Israeli passport, this doesn't show up there because they don't want the people outside to know about this. It'll be very confusing for them. But by Israeli law, there is no such thing as an Israeli nationality, even though there's such a thing as Israeli citizenship. There's a Jewish nationality. There are like 120, 130 nationalities. There's Druze nationality, Arab nationality, but being Jewish is a national, it's also religion, but it's a nationality. There is no Israeli nationality. And by Israeli law, the nation-state law of 2018, Israel is not the nation-state of the Israeli citizens. It's the nation-state of the Jews. This means two things. One, if you're not Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, and you live in Israel, you have no self-determination rights in Israel. This means that although you could, the Zionists always say, become a member of the Supreme Court, you're not allowed to run the country. So long as you're a minority, you can do whatever you want. But only the Jews have a schus for self-determination. They have to run the country. If the Jews ever become a minority, they'll have to figure out an eitzah. But by Israeli law, Israel's the country of the Jews. But it's not just the country of the Jews in Israel. It's the country of all the Jews. Israel is your country because you're a member of the Jewish nation. And therefore, Israel's your country. And therefore, if you want to know what a Jewish state means according to Israel, you want to know what the whole musag of what Israel's a Jewish state, what does it mean exactly? So, on Israel's website, Israel has a government website just like America does. It says the following. It's Israel's MFA, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, article written by Avigdor Lieberman, The Meaning of Israel as the State of the Jewish People. Let's go here. The term Jewish state refers primarily to nationality. Since their emergence in antiquity, the Jewish people have constituted a nation, a people, and a civilization, anchored in basic aspects of their identity, such as Judaism and the Hebrew language. Now here's the quote. Israel is to the Jewish people what France is to the French people, Ireland is to the Irish, and Japan is to the Japanese. That when anybody says Israel is the Jewish state, this is what it means. Israel is, in other words, so says Benjamin Netanyahu in his book, which is titled A Place Among the Nations, and now you understand what that means. He says that if you're an anti-Zionist, you have to be an anti-Semite, because saying that I'm a anti-Zion, I'm not an anti-Semite, I just don't want Israel to exist, is the same as saying that I'm not anti-French identity, I just don't want France to exist. If France doesn't exist, there's no French. So if Israel doesn't exist, there's no Jews. So if you don't want Israel, you don't want the Jews to exist. Israel, is this so weit from Rabbi Schechter's Shtickle Torah? The idea, and they had by the way, they were sued many times in Israeli court for not having an Israeli nationality. Often, appellants came to their courts and said, you got to make an Israeli nationality, this is nonsense. There are Jews, I have a survey over here, you'll see how Avodah Zarah works, but who don't believe not in Hashem, not in the Torah, not in nothing, they just want to be Israelis. So they sue Israel every now and then for that they should have an Israeli nationality. I have over here transcripts from the Supreme Court case where they paskin, it was an appeal court, and they said, no, we're not making an Israeli nationality. And here is the reason. Every judge gave a different shtickle Torah, but here, quote, the appellants argue, those are the Tovim, that quote, it is impossible to define the whole of world Jewry as belonging to the Jewish nation. For the Jews are all of the nationality of the states of which they are citizens. Now remember, when we say Am Yisrael, we mean Einu Moiseinu Umo El B'Soi Rasa. We don't mean when they say nation. We don't mean the same thing that they do. And I am an American. My family's from Poland. My wife a Litvaks. I have nothing to do with the state of Israel. It is not my country. It is as much shaykh to me as Ukraine or Lebanon, part of it. And yet Israel claims to be my country. But listen to this. And that's what these appellants said. How do you make Israel the nation, the country of all these Jews? Everybody is the nationality of the state where they live. Answer. We're dealing with an issue that is sensitive and controversial on the moral and historical level, and once which has been accompanying the Jewish people for many years and the Zionist movement from its inception. Now here's a quote. The conception that Judaism is not only a religious affiliation, but also a national affiliation is the foundation stone of Zionism. And they continue, a person can only have one nationality. A person cannot belong to two nations. If an Israeli nationality is to be recognized, the members of the Jewish nation in Israel will have to choose between two options, whether they are Israeli and then they will not be Jewish, or whether they are Jewish and then they will not be Israeli. This will fracture the nation. This is Zionism. The idea that Israel, the state of Israel, is the state of the Jews is real Avodah Zarah. The idea that it is central to Jewish life is real Avodah Zarah. The idea, Zionism is real Avodah Zarah, and this is what it means. It means nothing more and nothing less. Nothing. Everything else is downstream from here. The Zionists don't care if you're from or not from. They only want you to be Zionists. Fakert. If you're from and you're Zionist, they're even happier. But this is what they want. And this is the Avodah Zarah, and this is why the WZO is not merely an organization that hands out money. It's not a slush fund. The WZO is here's a question. You're members of the Jewish nation. Israel's your country. Do you have a right to vote in Israeli elections? No. How we ma'ached the country, the nation. So they made a WZO. It is the Congress, the Sanhedrin of Klal Yisrael, of all Jews. But it's the WZO, because the Zionist Congress. Zionism and Jewish nation, of course it's the same thing. Your WZO was designed so the people in Chutz La'aretz should be connected together as a nation with different parties, like America. We have Republicans, Democrats, they have many more parties, but it's designed for us to be a nationality. It is literally the fulfillment of what Zionism is, the Avodah Zarah of Zionism. And this Jerusalem program is literally listing all the things that I had from Reb Reuven, that we had from Reb Elchanan, all these things, literally listing all these things that are the real Avodah Zarah. And by the way, the $7 that you pay, I don't know if any of you remember, if you learned Reb Elchanan's Ikvas de Mashiach, he says another thing that people nowadays don't know what he's talking about. He says that according to the Zionists, if you Hashoikel es hashekel, and if you sing Hatikva, you're potter from Kol HaTorah Kula. What shekel is he talking about? So there was a shekel. The shekel, it was really a shilling, but they call it a shekel, was something that you gave to be an official Zionist. I have over here a photocopy of a page from the December 1914 Zionist magazine called the Maccabean. The Maccabees, right? There's an ad, a call for the shekel. Comrades, we Zionists are bound to look ahead to see beyond the present crisis in Jewish life, etc., 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 etc. We don't have to read that. Therefore, go out among your brethren and urge them to enroll in our organization. And to enroll how? by becoming shekel payers. The shekel is the token of enlistment in our cause. We should have not a few thousand, but a few 100,000 new recruits. You as an individual can do much to help this work. If you are a Zionist, also become a missionary among those who are not yet Zionists. You know, some people refer to Freie Yidden as not yet frum. So here, not Jews, people who are not yet Zionists. There's become a missionary among those who are not yet Zionists. Apply to us for shekel books. And when you receive them, make it your business to ask every Jew you know, are you a Jew? Yes. If you are Jew, you must be a Zionist. And if you are a Zionist, at least pay your shekel. Order your shekel books at once, do not delay. For the sooner our forces are organized, the easier our task becomes. We need every national Jew in our ranks. Help us to enlarge our organization. Federation of American Zionists, dated December 1914. This shekel is the $7 that you pay. This is the official shekel to vote in the WZO. That's their shekel. You are official member of the Zionist organization. That is exactly what it is. There are some parties that actually advertise this, that this is the shekel, not the Eretz HaKodesh. They won't do it because they don't want you to know it's not really Zionist, not really shekel, it's not really anything. It is. Israel actually claims, this is why they claim to represent all the Jews. Israel claims, Netanyahu claims to be the prime minister of the Jews. That has been said. He claimed to be a leader of the Jews. When he came to America, when Barack Obama was president, he wanted to talk to our Congress against Barack Obama's Iran deal. Before he left, he says, I go representing not only the people who elected me, but all the Jews all over the world. You are a Jewish national, and he is your prime minister. Jonathan Pollard, the Israeli spy that was caught spying on America, said, and it's all over the Israeli newspapers, that he would advise American Jews to spy on America for Israel because our loyalty is to Israel. And it's not just Netanyahu who said this. It started from the beginning. In Herzl, Yamach Shemoy, his original book, The Jewish State, he says the Zionists have official legal right to speak for all the Jews all over the world. He had a shtickle Torah. Believe me, it wouldn't work in the Choshen Mishpat Chabura. But he had a shtickle Torah based on old Roman law called Negotiarum Gestio. Basically, the Jews have nobody speak for them. The Zionists, therefore, are the spokesman for the Jews. Whenever the Zionists speak, it's in your name. And therefore, that's nationalism. That's the Avodah Zarah of Zionism. Who speaks for me? Who speaks for us? Well, the Torah speaks for us, Hashem speaks for us, and its representatives speak for us. According to Zionism, the state of Israel represents, in so many ways, all the Jews. And that's the real Avodah Zarah of Zionism. Now, today somebody sent me this. This was an ad for the Eretz HaKodesh, the leader of the Eretz HaKodesh, Pesach learner. That's Zionism. He says that the problem is the Reform have the plurality, they have more people than anybody else in the WZO, therefore they are speaking in the name of all Jews. Whoever is that has more representation in WZO speaks in the name of the Jews. Just like your congressman speaks in your name, because he's your politician, your representatives in the WZO speak for you. It is the Congress of Klal Yisrael. That's what it is. And that's why it was always usher to join this thing. It's literally like joining the Catholic Church. It's a davar poshet. A davar poshet. I'll give you another example of where you all know, it's mamish, I'm reminded, you all know the Beis HaLevi. Ani Yosef Hoyd Avichai, right? The Shvatim came to Yosef and said, we can't leave Binyamin over here because Pikuach Nefesh of our father. Pikuach Nefesh, they tainted. Yosef said back, Baba Maisis, what do you mean Pikuach Nefesh? You know who you're talking to? I'm Yosef. Were you worried when you sold me as an Eved? Were you worried about your father? You're full of baloney. It's not true that it's Pikuach Nefesh. A lot of times a person's brain, and believe me, the Shvatim did not purposely lie. We know whenever you have such a Dvar Torah, it's the dakus shebedakus of the subconscious of the subconscious of the subconscious that they meant it like that. And Yosef brought it out. A lot of times people think they mean something good, but really they mean something not good. There was Maisa here in Lakewood, in a Beis Yankov, a girls' school, a high school. They had this program that they had each kid, each student, had a soldier in Israel who's fighting, and every kid would, I know, right, I'm not sure exactly what they did, everything, they write letters, or be mispalel, and we're all mispalel for all the Yidden, and nobody wants any soldiers or anybody to be killed, that's for sure. But this business where the donations that people give, flashlights, rope, where you think the Israeli army doesn't supply their soldiers with enough stuff. This was a plan in 1956. They invented it, that they want to be a Yisachar Zvulun. The soldiers, starting 1956, were the role models for Klal Yisrael. They're the Yisachar. You're the Zvulun. They're the fighters. You have to do, you know, it's like a Rosh Hashiva. A Rosh Hashiva comes into a Beis Medrash, so a Bacha will run and get him a siddur to daven mincha. Rosh Hashiva can daven mincha, can get a siddur himself, but you want to be mishamish him. This whole thing is a psyop that people should be mishamish the soldiers. By the way, and the raya is, I'll tell you the Maisa in the girls' school in a moment, but I have they're Yidden in danger all the time in Nebuch. You remember COVID? There are people in COVID who had died, and I'm sure Ruba people over here, I don't know you, but I would bet money, every single one of you know firsthand somebody who died in COVID. My sister lost her husband. He went to the hospital about a week before Pesach. They put him on a ventilator, and I remember Pesach came and we were thinking, how's Eli going to get home if they discharge him? But Motzei Yom Tov, we found out he was nifta. The Levaya, it was that Kufa. Remember Pesach, the first Pesach, nobody was there except Chaver Kadisha. No family members were allowed to be there. The Shiva, my sister sat Shiva without her kids. Everybody Shiva separately. Nobody could come. Only by telephone, Shiva calls. Fathers, kids were not allowed to visit their parents in the hospital as they were dying. They weren't allowed to go in the room. Spouses couldn't visit spouses. You know, Ken Rachmon Litzlan, what this was? Did anybody ever think of writing letters to the people whose husbands are on ventilators or whose parents are on ventilators? I have no tainas. Did anybody ever think of making a special mishaberach for the people on ventilators? I have no tainas. We had Russian Jews who were in Siberia when I was a little kid, in Soviet Russia, when I was in Bochar also. Did anybody? No. Only Israel, when Israeli Jews are in danger, everybody has to mobilize, everybody has to send donations which they don't need, everybody has to act differently. Only special mishaberachs, special donations, different than every other Jew. This is because it's our soldiers, our. I also had a friend.
It's also happy curses because they're not.
Hold on, hold on a second. I also had a friend, I was a bocha, had a friend we were Bachram together, who was killed in the World Trade Center. Had a good friend who was killed in the World Trade Center. We were bunkmates in camp and roommates in the dormitory in yeshiva. There are American Jewish soldiers in the American army. People have less, even during wartime, people have feel less of a responsibility to the soldiers over here than they do over there. Anywhere. Ukraine, there were Yidden in danger in Ukraine. They were being bombed. There were Rosh Yeshivas who had these askonim do things to get the Jews out of Ukraine, and they did. But the way people act for Israel has nothing to do with Ahavas Yisrael, because then that would apply to other Jews too. It has to do with Israel. Here's what happened in the girls' school. One of the girls said, I think I'm going to marry my chayal. So that's a bad thing. They knew it's a bad thing. So they asked the Rav what to do. And the Rav said, it's tak a bad thing, but the ikar is we have to be mispal for the soldiers. Now I have an eitzah for the school, and for the Rav, and for everybody, everybody should be happy with it. Let the girls be mispalel or write letters to girl soldiers. That would be great, right? They'll never do it, and they should never do it. Because they don't want the girls to look up to the girl soldiers that don't belong over there. But what happened to Hakaras HaToiv? What happened to the Mesiras Nefesh? And the girl soldiers Kamuvin are in more danger than the boy soldiers. What happened to the Hakaras HaToiv? They disappeared off the face of the earth. You know, there are places that have minhagim, different nuschos that make two different mishaberachs v'cholim. There's a nusach for mishberach for some people like separate men and women, sarif gerach aleya. We used to do that by us. But when they make the mishberach for the soldiers, there's no separate mishberach for the women. And I asked somebody, why? Women soldiers? Yeah. They don't want to be, everybody knows they're there. It has nothing to do with Ahavas Yisrael. Ahavas Yisrael is Rav Shach. You have that book, In the Shadow? Page 415 in the Rav Shach section. I heard somebody said this over in Beis Medrash Gavoy about a year ago. Rav Shach said, it says over there, Rav Shach had a dilemma. What should I be mispalel for? He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't, if Chas v'Sholom, the Arabs win the war, so then Jews will be killed. But if Israel wins the war, K'vod Shamayim will be mismayit. Everybody will be running around, Didon Notzach, Koichi v'yotzim yodi. If you feel safe, here's another Zionist test. If you feel safer in the world because Israel's around, if you think Israel makes the world a drop safer for Jews, you're a Zionist. Because even though individuals have hishtadlus, everybody knows the Marsha in Kedushin, that Klal Yisrael as a whole has no hishtadlus, everything is only schar v'oinish. There is no country, no army, nothing in the world that could make Klal Yisrael safe. And if you think there is, you're a kofer in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha. But, getting back to this, Rav Shach said, it's Mamayit K'vod Shamayim. Oh, look, and everybody's proud. Our country won. It's Mamayit K'vod Shamayim. So Rav Shach said, I'm going to be mispalel that no Jews should be hurt and K'vod Shamayim should not be nismayit. How to do that? Good question. Satmarov Grada said the exact same thing. That we have to be mispalel what the Eitz is. He says the Rabbanu Shalom has to figure it out. Because he stellt zu the Gemara in Chagiga Daf Hey, Zibura v'Akrova. There's two different insects, a scorpion and a wasp, I think they are. If one bites somebody, he has to put on heat. And if he puts on cold, he dies. The other one is fakert. He has to put on cold, heat, he dies. So what do you do if they both bite you at the same time? So you're in bad shape. So he says the same thing, but we have to be mispalel that no Yidden should be killed and K'vod Shamayim should not be nismayit. Very simple. That's our tefillah. When the Jews in Ukraine who are being in danger, everybody's mispalel for them, right? Everybody's mispalel for the Jews in Ukraine. But did anybody think, oh yeah, I'm going to carry around a Ukrainian flag, and there are no Jews in Russia in danger, only in Ukraine, and Mr. Zelensky, the prime minister, is no less Jewish than Netanyahu. And we want all the Jews to get out and be safe, but anybody saying, yes, Ukraine, win the war, that's not our concern. Our concern is Kol Yisrael HaNesurim Batsaru B'Shivya, they should all be gesund and stark, and that's it. This business about winning wars and losing wars and Diton Notzach, that is nothing to do with the Ahavas Yisrael. They won't do it with the female soldiers. So joining the WZO is literally joining the Zionist movement. It was always usher because it's much like a Catholic church, very simple. Literally, it's not even an organization. It's designed by the Zionists in order to fulfill the idea that the Jews are a nation. This is the Congress. And the Jerusalem program lists every single piece of WZO that I mentioned. Now the question is, what's the difference between that and the Knesset, right? So I have to tell you something. Remember I said how little people know and how you really need to learn the sugya in order to understand. So it's mamish, it's a pella. You want to see this shmad, how it works? There is this sefer Boyas Hazman. It's a very small sefer and has pretty big print for a small sefer. In here, a lot of the sefer, meaning more than any other topic, there's shmuzin, so there's a lot of overlap, is about this question, about the Aguda joining the Israeli government. And his question is, l'chayra, it should be asur because of all of these reasons. His chabrus with the Rishoyim, all of the reasons that we mentioned. So why, and everybody knows organizations like the WZO are asur. That was Ugaret. There's nothing to discuss. The shaila is there a yotzim min aklal legabe the Knesset? Is this doima or is this not doima? But a Zionist organization, everybody agrees. Says Reb Reuven, and please, if you want, imagine like somebody talking about whether it's kedai to make a war for the Kaisel without knowing that there's a din of pikuach nefesh and Shabbos. One guy will say, well, the Chafetz Chaim said not to do it. Yes, but that was in the Chafetz Chaim's days. Today is different. I saw a video of this Rav saying you should, maybe a drop. Somebody said he said you should. Without knowing the sugya, you're up the creek. Here's the sugya. He asks the kasha straight up. Why was the Aguda? The question is not why it's also told to vote in the ZO, WZO, everybody knows, joining the Zionists, the Mutter, that was a terrible mistake. Rabbonim made the mistake. Remember Rav Shach said, Rabbonim, Tzadikim, Talmidei Chachamim don't know that. They don't know this either. It was a terrible mistake. So many people said, when the Shaila came up, Avad, it's the same as Israel joining the government. That was mamish, it was a terrible mistake. Because when Israel joined the government, the kasha was, how could you join the government? You're not allowed to join things like the WZO. So says Reb Reuven, two differences. First, I'm going to read you, I'll read it to you. Binin his chabrus im hatzionis, with joining Zionism. Hine, after he discusses his chabrus im Rishoyim, how we're not allowed to make Rishoyim leaders over us, all of those things. This is the nakud I want to discuss. Ubinin his chabrus im hatzionis. Hine, hoye bezel loirak his chabrus im Rishoyim. It's not the same as sitting with Rishoyim. Elagam lehischabra l'shita shemiyasteho umanhigeho shofu beruach shel minus l'shanois es tzuras am Yisrael milihikore am Hashem v'am haTorah. You're not talking about a bad guy who you're sitting next to. You're not talking about a Russia who you're friends with. You're talking about joining an organization whose very function it is to exist in order to change Klal Yisrael into a nationality. Etc., etc. V'harimu yad b'Torah lemor, these people attacked the Torah saying, Ki tzuras Yisrael tuluya be'eza regesh l'umi, or gizi, u'kechol hagoyim beis Yisrael. The tzura of a yid depends on some type of national or racial, means like geza, like family, a race or a family feeling, u'kechol hagoyim beis Yisrael. V'chol zeh, all of this, einoi shayach le'inyan ha'bechirus le'knesset. None of this problem has anything to do or applies at all to joining a parliament. Sha'knesset kishalatzmo, the parliament in and of itself, ein lo shum kesher im shita. It has no shita. A parliament is designed to represent its citizens. He did not have this mashal available in his days, but I do. There are Arabs in the Knesset. They're not Zionists. There are anti-Zionists in the Knesset, leftists, whatever, because a parliament doesn't have a shita. It is a representation of the people who elected the people. So if you have a whole bunch of people in Israel with a whole bunch of shitas, every single one of them are entitled to representation in this body called Knesset. The Knesset, you don't have to be a Zionist to be in the Knesset, and the Knesset allows all parliaments are like that. That's what a parliament is. It's not an organization for Zionists. It's not an organization of Zionism. It's an organization for Israelis. Therefore, the gam hashituf b'memshala ein b'zeh mishum shufis b'shita u'b'rayon. Joining these people are not joining a shita or an ideology. Anybody, again, even the Arabs can be in the Knesset. You have to promise that you're going to not break the laws and stuff like that. But you're not mechuyev to be a Zionist. The WZO was made to be a Zionist. The Jerusalem program it's a Zionist thing. In fact, let me see if this works. I have today, let's see if, no, I don't know why the sound isn't coming out of there, but you know what, maybe I'll play it out of these speakers. You won't hear it well. I'll tell you afterwards what it said. There's a guy, Herbert Bloch. Oh, no. There's a guy, Herbert Bloch. This Herbert Bloch is one of the big heads in the WZO. He's a big shot in the WZO. And he was interviewed, and they asked him, are there any anti-Zionists in your organization? Talk about the Freya. Doesn't dafka mean the Fruma. There are a lot of Freya Jews here in Chutz La'aretz that are against Israel, right? Against Zionism. All sorts of people. Are they in the WZO? Here's his answer.
We believe that the people who will want to participate will be Zionists. They'll have to go to a website called zionistelection.org. They'll have to agree to the platform of the Zionist movement. They'll have to pay the small fee to the American Zionist movement for their registration and processing, and select a Zionist slate. So if you're an anti-Zionist Jew, and we hope there aren't too many, but we know there are some, I don't think they'll want to participate in that.
There aren't any. He says because you have to sign the Jerusalem program. I would imagine, he says this is for Zionists, you have to sign the Jerusalem program, and therefore anti-Zionists will not come into our organization. Even though they're Jews, even though everything, forget the Fruma. The Freya, they don't want to come into the WZO. I'm not talking about the Reform. Some of them do. The Reform have a party. But these anti-Zionists, the Reform aren't anti-Zionist. And the ones that are, Taka won't make a party. He says, no, the Jerusalem, this is for Zionists. And that's the difference between the Knesset in Eretz Yisrael and the WZO. It's very simple. It's not my vart. Literally, the kasha he asks is not, why should the WZO be Osir if this is mutter? It's fakert. Everybody knows that this is Osir. The shaila is why this should be. Second reason, he says, because in terms of his chabrus with the Knesset, what are you going to do? He says, you're a citizen of Israel. You pay taxes. You use their what do you call it? I don't know what. I'm making things up. Fire department, police department, whatever it is. You have a zchus. You're a citizen. How are you going to separate from the Israeli government? You're not going and joining something. You're a taxpayer. You're a citizen. You have zchusim. So you're mechuber va'oimid. It's not you going there. What choice do you have not to join? This is no different than being a citizen. Part of being a citizen is you have the right to vote. But in order to vote in the WZO, you need to join an organization. So it's Eina Doime B'chlal. The first thing is mamish, it's boror, it's a dover poshut. Parliaments, congresses, they are represented of their representations of their people. This has nothing to do, zero, nothing to do at all with a WZO. Zionism nowadays, one is getting late, but I've heard people say that Zionism doesn't really exist nowadays anymore. I want you to know that they were saying that since Zionism started. As you saw, Reb David said they didn't believe that Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion were Machal Shabbos. In 1957, a year before Israel's 10th anniversary, somebody is a Sefer Tiv Levov from the Satmarov, somebody came to him and said, the Zionists, they're no Zionists anymore. 1957, these are just L'Teyovoin. It has happened throughout history, and they've always said that. And the reason is because part of the propaganda is that they don't want you to know what the real agenda of Zionism is. They'll tell you, we're just here to protect the Jews. It's just a safe place. It's the right of Jews. It's the right of Jews to live in the land or something. It's all security, that's all it is. When they chopped off the payas of the Yaldei, they went and they had a hearing in the Knesset over there, and they said self-defense, diseases and stuff in the payas, they said. I'm not joking. It's all, everything is self-defense. But they'll tell you they're only there to help the Jews. No, they're there to create a new identity because they believe that Klal Yisrael are disgusting. And they want to, and only if you're not a Zionist. If you are a Zionist, then you're not disgusting. Because then you're like Jabotinsky with a beard. Listen, David HaMelech was religious and he was a Zionist, right? So that's what so you can be a Zionist too. Have over here, by the way, in case you want to know where you could find Zionist Deus Koizvis and Apikorsis, so have here, there's a guy, the old president of Israel, President Shimon Peres. We don't need even to talk about Nebuch Apikoris or Zeichet Apikoris. He was once upon a time frum. He brags about a bracha he got from the Chafetz Chaim. And Mishpacha magazine brags about how when he died, it was on the Chafetz Chaim's yahrzeit. At the same year, he's 93 like the Chafetz Chaim. Mamish. And Zionism doesn't exist, stell sich vor, you know. And when the Chacham Ovadia, Yosef, was nifta, Mishpacha magazine, October 16th, 2013, had a hesped by Shimon Peres. Now, remember these things as I read you these words, because yesterday you would probably not have noticed this. So, Klal Yisrael is really the religion and everything is just cultural characteristics of the people. But the Jews are a nation. That's the ikar. And the ikar is you have to be loyal to the nation. One more thing I have to tell you. How did the Torah come into existence? How come Yidden are so frum? If we should have all been like Shimon Peres for thousands of years, right? So here's the teretz is because they hold that Yiddishkeit, that really the ikar of Yiddishkeit it's a religion, but the main part of Klal Yisrael, the Tzura, the Jews are a nationality. Beis HaMikdash, after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, so the Rabbonim, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, amongst others, this is what it says in their books. They packed up the nationality into a religion. And it's zeitveilig, it's temporary, the religion. Only until we get our Medina back. Now we could really be a nation. So we don't need the religion anymore. That's a shita. Now listen to what he says about Chacham Ovadia. He said he was a erlicha, he had no ulterior motives. All that concerned him was what had happened to our people in the past and would happen to us in the future. We had been through 3 churbanos, I'm quoting, the destruction of the Bayis Rishon, the destruction of the Bayis Sheni, and the Holocaust. Listen to this now. Perhaps the second churban was what established the place of the rabbinate in the history of Judaism. So you want to know what cheshivas does the rabbinate have? Theodor Herzl in his book says after we have a state, they'll have a rabbinate, but the rabbis will stay in their place. The rabbis were like the leaders of Klal Yisrael. How did this happen? Perhaps the second Churban is what established the place of the rabbinate in the history of Judaism. After the destruction of the Bayis Sheni, the Gedolei Hador asked themselves how the Jewish nation could be preserved. We don't have a country, we don't have a Medina, we don't have nothing. In contrast to what people think, the Jews were prospering, but their material success was actually distancing them from Judaism. The encroaching materialism threatened us with spiritual extinction. And so the Gedolei Hador looked for ways to preserve Judaism. Their solution, to learn, to know, to study Torah day and night. They said, the Rabbanim said, after the Churban Bayis Sheni, you have to be religious, you have to study Torah, because this way you'll keep the nation together. Rav Ovadia carried on this tradition and saw Torah learning as an instrument to achieve two things. One, it would involve the people and make them feel connected, and it would preserve the elevated status of the Jewish spirit. Now, most people who read this just glance it over and don't understand Mamish Divrei Bella that he just said. We now understand it. And this is what I mean, that when you understand the sugya, you will see things that you otherwise would not. You will understand things that you will otherwise would not. This is Zionism. It's not throw away your tefillin. It's not let's make a Medina. There were Zionists that said we don't need a Medina. There were Zionists that didn't want a Medina. We should be like the Kurds. The Zionists got us a flag. They had a flag before they had a Medina. They got us a language. They had a language before they had a Medina. They got us a culture, names, before they had a Medina. You want to know what I have another magazine. April 30th, 2014. Same company. Here, what do they think of us? What do the Friar think of the Fruma? So they made a survey. And they have a whole 30 questions. So I want you to understand what we're dealing with. Now in America, by the way, if somebody doesn't know about Moshe Rabbeinu, he also doesn't know about Yeshua, he doesn't know about anything, that's secularism, right? And if that guy starts doing mitzvahs, or even let's say he wants to come to your house for Shabbos or something, so that's a good thing, he's going in the right direction, okay? But in Israel, if you have one of these Zionists that believe that there is national treasures of the Jews, and the Torah is a national treasure, they don't have to even believe in Hashem, but they will go to a Pesach Seder because, well, they say it celebrates Cherus, or it's just a ceremony. It's the Mecholos HaMachanayim. It's mamish the Mecholos HaMachanayim. In Israel, because they know about Yeshua, they have a very strong sense of Jewish identity, but it's a different religion. So listen to this, otherwise you're not going to make sense of this. Question. Do you have a positive or negative view of Haredi public? So the secular, we're not doing with the traditional now, just the secular. It's a 56 say positive, 27 say negative, fine. Do you have a family member who considers themselves Haredi? Yes, 38%. Okay. Does the Haredi lifestyle help preserve the Jewish character of the state? Means, you hear this question? Does the Haredi lifestyle help preserve the Jewish character of the state? 77%, 77.1% of the Chilonim said no, it does not. The Haredim don't. Next question, listen to this. How important is it to preserve the Jewish character of the state of Israel? 88.1% said it's either important or very important, but the Haredim are not the ones that contribute to the Jewish character. Now you understand. Yesterday you might not have understood this. What they call Jewish character and we call Jewish character is two completely different things. So you have a question. How much would it disturb you or not disturb you if your child were to marry a non-Jew? So the Chilonim, about 50-50. Okay? Next question. Is it important or not important? Now, so they said, most of them, vast majority, want a Jewish character of the state, but the Haredim do not contribute anything to it. You see what's happening. This is the Zionism. When the Zionists say Jew and we say Jew, it's a homonym. It means two completely different things. They are as close to Judaism as the Catholic Church. Even less. Catholic Church at least holds you have to believe in God. The Catholic Church at least holds from the Old Testament, they hold from Brias Hoylem, and at least the Pope wears a yarmulke. These guys, you don't have to believe in anything, but you still want Jewish. That's Zionism. It's not secularism. These are guys that know Yeshua, but know nothing about Moshe. Here's the question. Is it important or not important that your children will know Jewish traditions and will be educated in the national values, customs, and conduct that had been passed down throughout the generations? Whoever asked this question, now you know what this means. National values, customs, and conduct. 47% said it's very important, 38% said it's important. So a vast majority wants national values that were handed down in the generations. A vast majority wants a Jewish character to the state. You think that means they want to be frum? You think that means they're on the right track? Oh no. If that was America, that would be true. But there it's a national character. They want a koisel as a national symbol, not as a holy place. They want a koisel that they will even die for. But Shabbos, not important. They'll light candles maybe, whatever the tradition says. They don't want religion, they don't want Torah, they don't want Hashem. The point is that this is what Zionism, there's no Zionism nowadays. This is classic Zionism, literally. That you could want a Jewish character without a religion. You could want national behaviors, but not Torah and mitzvahs. This literally is what Zionism wanted to do. Literally. No more, no less. This is the real the Zionism of Herzl, the Zionism of Jabotinsky. He said, Jabotinsky, I don't care if I have to eat gefilte fish. Doesn't matter to me. He doesn't care. It's a nationalism, that's all it is. It's mamish like somebody took the mitzvahs and made them into getchkes. And therefore, and this is what they want. This is what this WZO wants. It wants to represent you. By the way, even though, not finished with Reb Reuven. Reb Reuven says it's still not enough. This is still not enough. It's not enough to give a heter to vote in the Knesset. Why? He says, because Kale Hadas, they're going to say, you want to know what Das Torah is? This is Das Torah. He said, people are going to say that, no, we're shutfim with the Zionists. They're going to say, after we went into the Knesset, we're not as opposed to Zionism anymore as we used to be. He says, chas v'sholom, it's also to say that. We are literally the same amount opposed to Zionism as the Neturei Karta. He didn't mean Neturei Karta from Monsey today. They didn't exist. And the Neturei Karta in those days was the name of a faction in the Eidach Chareidis. The Aguda was another faction in the Eidach Chareidis. Through the voting, the Neturei Karta took over the Eidach Chareidis, and the Aguda broke off, they left. But that's what he means. He means what we call the Eidach Chareidis is what he means. We are no less anti-Zionist than them. He says, Cholila v'cholila, anybody should say such a thing. We went in order to fight. And it's not enough, because I know, he said, that people are going to say, no, the Aguda is somewhere in the middle. He says, chas v'sholom. So it's not true. He says, therefore, he brings the Gemara at the beginning, the Gemara at the beginning of Yuma, the Kohen Gadol. They dafko and metameh him, then metar him. They want to make sure he's not at Stuki. And it says because they made a kula over there in the Kohen Gadol, they made extra chumras. He said, therefore, we have to always speak about how bad the Zionists are, constantly and always, in order that nobody should think that we're less Zionist than the Eidach Chareidis is. That we're more Zionist, less anti-Zionist than the Eidach Chareidis. And this assessment that we said to go into the Knesset, that doesn't mean we have to do it now and forever. It means that if we decide that it's a better strategy to go out and out of the Knesset and protest, we should, and it has to be reassessed all the time, al pi das Torah. He says it's not enough. He says the people that go into the Knesset, they have to be choshev yidden, like tzaddikim, because it's like an aveira lishma. They're sitting there in this polluted place, and they have to be the best people that you could find. He has like a half a dozen tanoim over there. The Satmarov said, it's not going to work. He brings a stei chemed by machine matzahs, machine tzitzis, a divrei chayim, a stei chemed, that whenever you make a tanai for a mitzvah heter with a tanai, at the end the stei chemed says the tanai will stay and the heter will stay and the tanai will leave. That was one of the nikudas hamachloikas over here. Reb Reuven said, no, we have to do these tanoim. And he said, Satmarov said, it's not going to happen. Aveira lishma, he says it's so hard to do a mitzvah lishma. So you're going to get people who are able to do Aveira Lishma. And who are the people over here? But in any case, I have to tell you, and even though this sefer is written, it's black and white. I don't have to tell you what kind of a goyin and a tzaddik Reb Reuven was. And he uses all his goyinis he made, this is not a little vart, he made a whole shtickle Torah over here, the amount of marmakoimis and stuff in that little piece is Maval al-Harayin. Every line is another Gemara, Rabbeinu Yoina, another halacha, and it goes pages and pages. And even though it's black and white, and even though everybody knows it exists, the most frequently asked question about this WZO is, people got to explain the difference between the WZO and the Knesset. Can anybody tell me why? Well, it's what we spoke about at the beginning. This is the knowledge gap. The knowledge is in front of our faces. Zionism, what it wanted and what it wants, is in front of our faces. Just got to open up the Sefer and read it. This was literally, of all the topics in here, that was literally more pages spent on that topic than any other topic. And it's there once, twice, maybe 3 times, because there's a lot of overlap. These were shmuzin. And it's there. The WZO, these guys, besides that it's a Zionist organization, the Aguda at least had a Moyetzas Gedolei HaTorah. Whether they listen to them or not all the time is another story, but at least they have a Moyetzas Gedolei HaTorah. If somebody's doing something bad in the Aguda, you have who to complain to. It happens all the time in America. Aguda does something bad, you complain to somebody in the Moyetzas, maybe they'll do something, maybe they can do something. But you're talking about an organization that everything they do, every little thing they do is a shaila of das Torah, of mitzvahs, averis, without a moyetzes gedolei HaTorah, without rabbanim, without anything. At least the Mizrahi party has Rabbi Herschel Schechter as a delegate in the Mizrahi party. And the head of the Eretz HaKodesh used to be a delegate in the Mizrahi party also. So we know his hashkafas. But there's no moyetzes, there's no nothing, and even though Reb Reuven wrote this and he made these Gedorim and Siyogim, still, Ad Hayom Hazeh, people always say the Aguda is less anti-Zionist than the Eidach Redis. Always. And he said, Chas v'shalom, I don't want to allow such a thing. And nonetheless, people do this. Theodor Herzl, at the first Zionist Congress, he said, I did an amazing thing, something nobody would have thought possible. I got together the Fruma Jews, he called them conservative, ultra-conservative. What that means is from, in that language. I got together with the ultra-liberal and everybody under one roof here in the Zionist Congress. That shows, said Theodor Herzl, we are one nation. When Itamar Levine, when it came to a Mi Yehudi problem in the Knesset, Itamar Levine got up and made a speech. I actually quoted him in my book. Einu moiseinu uma ela b'soiraso. That's what he said. That's exactly what he said. And he told Ben Gurion that you're like destroying a Klal Yisrael. He made a whole decent speech. And Ben Gurion said, what are you talking about? You signed the Declaration of Independence. He says, you're maskim to this. You know that this is a secular country. You know that we don't follow the Torah. And you were maskim. Now, you saw the whole Reb Reuven, aber von deswegen, afal pikein, this is what the Zionim are taining. Stel sich vor, Rabbi Sai. What's going to be in next door, later, another year, 2 years, if Klal Yisrael joins, Haredim join WZO, what are they going to say about us then? Without the Gedorim and Siyagim, without any Moyetzes, without any Rabbonim to talk to, and they claim that the Israeli Knesset doesn't claim to represent the Jews in Chutz La'aretz, but the WZO does. The Knesset only claims to be a parliament of a country that doesn't have a Shita. The WZO claims to be the Zionist organization that represents is of Klal Yisrael. Does anybody with a brain have a havamina that it makes sense? Never mind that it's osur because of all these isurim. Does anybody have a havamina of a brain that these people are not going to say, okay, now look how many Jews joined the Zionist organization? They're already saying, look how many Jews joined the Israeli government. That shows they're not so Zionist, which is sheker v'chozov, at least officially supposed to be sheker v'chozov. Or the fact that they did join doesn't mean it. That's for sure. Stelzer for, just imagine what's going to be over here. Because what, the reform? Rahman, I have an idea. We should all work on Shabbos. Imagine you work on Shabbos. Because if I don't get the job, a reform guy will get the job, and then he'll give his maisa to reform moistus. And by me working on Shabbos, we're taking money away from the reform. That's mamish what's going on over here. That's mamish what's going on over here. We'll take money away from the reform because I'll be machal. Shanu shama, what kind of crazy thing is this? Besides that, it's mamish also black and white. It doesn't make any sense to do it. You're going to leave this achrayus in the hands of balabatim? At best, will be nice. In the hands of balabatim? Without any moyetzes? Without anything, reprove it. The Stipler, in a letter also about voting in the Israeli Knesset, he says that they're soymech that the people in the Knesset are going to ask the moyetzas everything. So what they do, they don't, is another story. But at least that's the idea. Without that, what are you doing? I'll give you an example. Here. So we have, what are they going to do in such a case? Have an article over here from Israeli newspaper Haaretz. It's in English, 30th of October 2013. You know, in Israel they do backwards the date. It's called Yeshiva Funding for Foreign Students Restored, but with a Zionist twist. They wanted to make a law. Government funding for ultra-Orthodox students from abroad who are studying in yeshivas in Israel is being reinstated, but their curriculum will now include lessons in Zionism, according to a report in Mariv Daily. NIS 50 million new shekels in funding would be restored next year in exchange for the inclusion of lessons in Zionist values. Zionism is not traditionally emphasized at Haredi institutions. That Lashon is very similar to the Lashon that Eretz HaKodesh is saying, that WZO was not traditionally part of the Haredi community, right? That's the Lashonis that they use. In terms of the agreement, every ultra-Orthodox student from abroad will have to attend a series of mandatory lessons in Zionism, supplemented by visits to the Israel Defense Forces, etc. Tell me, if this law comes, do you think that the Eretz HaKodesh what do you think they're going to do? Tell me, you want to vote for them? They say to vote. What is their platform? What is their shita? Before you vote for something, you got to know their shita. So they don't like the reform. Good, gesundheit. Got it. What are they going to do over here? Which is a bigger danger to us, to our tzetzainu v'tzetzainu, the mishugana women of the wall, which they anyway have no control over, or this? Rahman al-Itzlan. We have over here, this is from the WZO's website. He's explaining about the WZO. His name is Neria Meir, head of Department of Zionist Activity in the Diaspora. The Department of Zionist Activity in the Diaspora and French speakers is responsible for connecting the World Zionist Organization to Jewish federations, communities, and organizations all over the world. We believe strongly that Israel is an essential part of the Jewish identity. Our mission is to connect Jews to Israel through partnerships with local organizations, etc. This is their belief. Israel, Zionism, is literally part of Jewish identity. And this is, by the way, I'm going to stop in a couple minutes, but this is literally all over. This is a this is a report from a Zionist think tank called the JPPI, Jewish Public Policy Institute, from 2018. It discusses how to change Jews into Zionists. Haredim, leftists, rightists, Freya, you name it. And it goes through each community. And this is in their 70th anniversary. One of the accomplishments of the Jewish state in its 70 years of existence is that it has created new expressions and forms of Judaism and new Jewish religious and cultural practice. Many Israeli Jews, it says 97% of Israeli Jews participated in a Passover Seder, and it lists the various mitzvahs that they do. Undoubtedly, many Israeli Jews observe these practices not necessarily as religious behavior, but they find in them natural, cultural, family, and community meaning. This is reflected in the JPPI study, which according to which 43% of Israel's Jewish population see religion as the central component of Jewishness. This includes the Haredim, 43%, and 57% see either nationality, culture, or ethnicity as the main point of being Jewish. 93% of Israeli Jews identifying as Chilonim Lachalutin, totally fry, participate in a Passover Seder. But as it says, this is not a religious act. A related development that they accomplished is the sacralization, that means making holy, but holy doesn't mean kadosh like us, in the sense that the American flag is holy, you can't put it on the floor or something like that. And related development is the sacralization of national concepts such as the national homeland, Eretz Yisrael, and the state itself among significant parts of the population. In other words, sacredness and sacred meaning do not only attach themselves to traditional Jewish ritual objects, such as tefillin or the lulav and etrog, and the commandments associated with them, but also to national concepts such as the land of Israel, the state, and the Jewish people. The mixture of kodesh and choil, that's Zionism. Here, look what it says. The state of Israel, there's a machloikis in the survey between the Haredim and the Chilonim regarding whether the state of Israel, Zionism, is a replacement of Jewish ethno-religious identity or a fulfillment of that Jewish ethno-identity. Further analysis of these surveys shows the difference between Chilonim and those who self-identify as religious is not only or even primarily one of the degree of religious observance. There are significant differences between the groups regarding deeply held ideological and conceptual ideas concerning the fundamentals of Jewish existence.